Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to FPL BlackBox episode 91, I think it is. No, as this week, he is on the beach in Mexico, which I'm trying not to be too bitter about. But in his place, a return for BlackBox favourite, Mr. Luke Williams, aka Disabled. Good evening, Luke. How are you?
I'm very good. I certainly wish I was in Mexico getting sun-kissed like Az, but this is a decent backup for sure.
Well,
What a guy.
I know. I do love your company, Luke, but if compared to a beach in Mexico, I think we both prefer to be there, wouldn't we? But yeah.
Absolutely. How's he get away with it?
I don't know. In the middle of the season as well. It's shocking. He is winning at life, as we discussed earlier, and he's beating me at FBL, but not as much as you. Look at your rank. It's nice to have a manager with a six-figure rank on here for once.
Yeah, I noticed till you waited till it got to about that before you invited me on.
Yeah, you've had a bad run, haven't you? But you were about 50k. What's the highest you've been this season?
Oh God, I was actually 9k very briefly, but I think it was between a Saturday and a Sunday, so I don't think that actually counts, does it? Let me bring it up. I was hovering around 11k just before. I think that was the highest I was. Then it was sort of around 20k, and a steady slide happened just before the World Cup, a couple of weeks before. Started going down like 10k here or there, but then since the restart, it's just been a red arrow every week, unfortunately.
So we've got to start by talking about this because much has been made on this show, and I don't know if you've been aware of it, of your departure from your previous way of playing, shall we say. So you used to be the maverick in the community. You used to be known as the guy who even made late riser blush when it comes to taking chances, right? And this season you've changed your strategy. So I can't let it go without you talking a bit about that. What was behind it? And how you found it. Have you found it more enjoyable? Have you kind of missed taking risks? How are you feeling about it?
To be honest, I think probably mirrors most people out there that you have the most enjoyment in this game when you get points.
I knew you'd say that. I knew you'd say points are fun, right? Is that your take?
Yeah, it is. But I will say, because I've played this game for a very long time, that it is kind of boring playing this way. I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't really get the same enthusiasm. But like I say, the points cover for it. You know, you're doing well when you're sat in a sort of 10k, 11k. Everything seems to go your way. The transfers are obvious. You just keep plowing along like that, and yeah, it's pretty boring. And you do miss those highs of the old. You know, you hit a Bale triple captain or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, those are obviously the very high points, and usually to get those, you have to suffer multiple weeks in your quest to achieve it. So, yeah, I'm enjoying it because it is. At the end of the day, I did actually used to play like this, and I do play like this in other games. In FPL, I just lost my spark a little bit. I think it's just to do with the sheer number of people. You know, it's trying to make the game more interesting for myself. Essentially, just thought I'm going to try and world star my way to first place, basically. But when I quickly realised that's probably not going to happen, and you need a hell of a lot of luck, regardless of how you're playing, for that to happen, I thought, well, I better try and get some respectability back and just play the way it should be played, basically. So that's what I've been doing, and I'll continue to do so, and hopefully. Should get a half decent rank come the end of the season, but the way it's going at the moment, not overly confident.
It's just a bit bad. I mean, you should talk about your pod as well. You've got inspected goals goes out, or does it go out on a Tuesday or Thursday? Is it Luke? Is that right?
Yeah, we do one on Thursday. Basically, just mugging off FPL review, which is obviously the favoured model in the community most of the time. One of many, but the guy's a genius, basically, what he's put together, and we pretty much just look at what the machine tells us we should do, and then usually ignore it and do our own thing or do something relatively close. It's helped me. It's helped me most of the season. I must say that I don't often actually do the top move, which is something that you'll see in the community a lot of the time. People just follow it blindly. I often don't do that, and obviously spend an eternity tweaking the expected minutes of all the players until it fits perfectly with what my original plan was. But yeah, it's a nice tool, I think, at the end of the day to use, and the pod sort of just uses that to help us. So yeah, I enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, Az and I tease about using models, but I mean, I've used models for absolute years, still use FPL Review. I don't perhaps swear by it like others do, but I definitely use it to shape my decision-making every week. By the sounds of it, very similar to you. I don't always, use it to guide my transfer, but it will be one voice in my head when I'm making my decision. And it's just really interesting that you've gone that way. You've had a good season. How much of that do you put down to the quality of the models and the kind of data-driven algorithms that are out there, and how much do you put down to it's just you're taking fewer risks?
That's a hard question. I do give credit to it, absolutely. But I think the big part of it for me, I mean, last year I took something like 100 points in hits, so cutting out hits, I think, is the main thing for me. I've always had, like most people who've played this game a long time, an idea of what the best transfers are. I mean, the community and just being engaged in the game will tell you what the best transfers are most week. And then, they're very, very much not often wrong. So that part's particularly easy. I think it's just realizing how much a -4 can impact you, especially when, I didn't like looking at my team and seeing a player where I just thought, he's got no chance of points this week. It's just not going to happen. So I've got to do something to make that happen, to force it. And usually what happens is when you force it, the player you bring in doesn't do particularly well. And if you'd have just left it, the player who came off the bench miraculously get points, because at the end of the day, there is a lot of luck in football in this game, isn't there? Every single week, just in fixtures, in betting, it's extremely hard. And sometimes you just don't need to force it. I think Arsenal getting a clean sheet away to Spurs, this week was an example where a lot of people would have probably benched Arsenal players, made hits for double game week players, could have just left it and probably been better off. I mean, we've still got the other game to go for Man City if you went there, but it's stuff like that. So I have noticed actually this season, nearly every week that I have taken hits, which is only 2, I think, I've got a big fat red arrow, and this is what so far as well.
Yeah. You used to be hit crazy. I used to love watching, like checking your team on a Saturday morning to see what you've done, and I do miss that. I do miss that in you, but it's like the reverse of Star Wars. Luke, I sense there is still good in you. I still sense you haven't given away to machine totally, basically.
Well, I definitely haven't, because I had Lucas Digne in my team.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Right? So exactly, it's still there. I'll never fully get rid of it.
Yeah.
But another experience like Lucas Digne has given me, and it will be gone forever, let me tell you.
Well, you might not got rid of your Maverick sensibilities, but have you got rid of your pubic hair? That's what I want to know, because we move on to our sponsor, which I know everyone was looking forward to this. I know Az was looking forward to this, just hearing me and Luke discuss this. Manscaped kindly sponsor this episode of FPL BlackBox. This is the 4th or 5th time that Manscaped has supported us. They were our dream sponsor when we sat out and when we started doing FPL BlackBox, and here we are, still going with them 4th or 5th time. So we are very, very pleased to be sponsored by them. The Manscaped Performance Package 4.0 has everything you need to keep your sweet sack in check. This is the script, Luke, by the way. This is not me coming up with this stuff. Included in the package you find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, the Crop Preserver ball deodorant, the Crop Reviewer toner, the Performance Boxer briefs, and all in a travel bag to keep your goodies. If you are interested in the Manscaped package, and why wouldn't you be, the call to action for us to announce to you is you can get 20% off and free shipping with the code BlackBox at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code BlackBox at manscaped.com. Luke, my question to you, do you think that Az has done his bikini line before we left for Mexico?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That man, he's a modern man, isn't he?
He is a very modern man, and that is why Manscaped is part of his routine, surely.
Oh, he'll have spent hours on it, I'd imagine. Probably needs it as well. Look, he's a hairy bloke, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, you probably have more knowledge of that than me, but yeah, I'm sure that I'm making a guess that he absolutely is. I take it this isn't your bag, so to speak, but would you be dabbling in this?
Well, if I don't do it, I'm a married man, so it's only going to be me who goes anywhere near that area. Put it that way.
Yes, those are the facts in this area of the world as well. Let's move on, shall we, and talk about FPL. Let's look at Az's team. I don't want to dwell too much on this because he beat us both, Luke. 60 points is what he got. He didn't triple captain Haaland. We'll talk about that in a minute. I don't think any of us did. But he got the goalkeeper right, Luke, which is what we didn't do. He's got Ward and Kepa, and so no surprise that he played Kepa for the 10 points. Trippier came in with 9, Botman with 6. That was his transfer. I think Botman came in and got him the clean sheet straight away. He's got Luke Shaw, 2 points, playing tonight as well. Obviously, United are playing Palace, kicking off in about 50 minutes as we stand now. De Bruyne just the 5 points. Kulusevski the 2, Rashford 10. Odegaard, was his transfer with 9.
He did both, I think, didn't he?
Did he? Yes, he did. He took a hit, didn't he? Or did he have 2 transfers? I think he had 2 transfers. So I think it was Trossard came out for Odegaard. Haaland captain 4, still to play, of course. Kane the 2, again, still to play. And then Martial, who apparently is not in the lineup tonight with the 1 point, and that's all he's going to get from Martial. He did all right, didn't he? 60 points. That's a good score this week from what I've seen.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd bite your hand off for that. Bit surprised he went for Botman, given what we're going to talk about later. Good chance they probably blank in 25. But it was particularly in his position, I guess, because he's got Bueno and Patterson. So, yeah, not sure about that, but obviously he's cashed in and points mean prizes, so well done. And Kepa with a 10, incredibly frustrating for me and you both on our bench, I think, this week. But yeah, happy with the team. It looks very similar to most people's teams, and I think Kulusevski's probably the wild card there out there, I would say.
Hold on, what are you saying? Are you saying he's template? Is that what you're saying?
It looks pretty template to me, I'm sorry to say.
Oh, I love that. Any dig we can get in, please, Luke. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And the Kulusevski call is out there, I guess. I mean, Botman is becoming template on Twitter, and he's very popular, kind of double up on the Newcastle clean sheets. Where do you stand on that? Because everyone's got Trippier. So you're not getting points. You're not getting advantage from those Newcastle cleanies. So Botman makes sense, right?
Yeah, I suppose it does if you expect them to continue, and the data's still right up there, and they're obviously proved to be a very good in that area. 11 clean sheets, more than anyone else, so makes sense. The thing at the moment, we've all got so much money, I think, unless you're going for a setup like Az has got here with a triple premium, you can almost afford any defender, and you don't really want any of the expensive defenders, so Botman kind of just makes sense. At the end of the day, he's one of the few defenders who's continuously returning points. So I completely understand it. It's just like I say, from 25, you might have a little bit of an issue in that area. But
he's got a big issue, I think.
Yeah. I mean, 3 Man United. What is it? 2 Newcastle. So that's not particularly good. So we'll see. But we've got time, haven't we, in between there? And points mean prizes. I mean, I can't really speak. I went for Digne thinking, well, he probably is going to play 25. He's got 3 home games in 4, and look what happened to me. So there is always that problem of looking too long term in this game, isn't there? Sometimes. So fair play.
We are going to look long term in this episode. We are going to talk about the double game hits and the chip strategy in a moment when we've gone through our teams, and we will go back to the issue that Az has got with his back line because, his 3 defenders that he'd want to play are all likely to miss game week 25, leaving him with Bueno and Patterson, who's injured. So he could be in some strife. He's got to be thinking about that. Okay, my team, 40 points, pretty miserable. I took a hit as well. But I've got plenty of players to play. Ederson, the 1 point, playing Spurs tomorrow. Shaw playing tonight with the 2. Trippier with the 9, means nothing really. Doherty with the 1, but plays tomorrow at City. Probably won't get anything, might not even start. Talking of not starting, Ake, 1 point, might not start tomorrow against Spurs. Rashford, 10, he's got Palace tonight, of course. Salah, 2, Saka, 6. Zaha, who stuck around just because of the double, who plays tonight. Luke shaking his head. I'm sure he's got a view on that. Does he even start for Palace tonight? I really hope so.
I'm just trying to look, but
he's got to be, surely. Yeah, okay.
He's playing, yeah.
Well, 2 points nailed on. Haaland, captain, 4, and Eddie Nketiah with the 2. I have Mitrovic on the bench, so I was quite pleased with the outcome with the penalty, obviously. And there's Kepa there with his 10 points staring at me. Annoying. Yeah. So it's miserable. I mean, this is a low score, even by a week of low score standards. But I have got players to come. I've got 7 double game weekers in there who should all play the second game. So we'll see. You never know. Zaha might get something in the home game. He might do something tonight. We'll see. I need something like that. I need the City clean sheet as well. And when we get onto your team in a moment, it's the same story there because you, interestingly, went the same players as me with the City. So do you want to go for your team for the podcast listener?
Yeah, like you say, it's very similar. 48 points. I took a hit as well. I've got Ederson in goal for his 1 point. Kepa on the bench. Got Shaw, Ake and Trippier at the back. I think that's fairly common, at least for the Shaw and Trippier. Maybe not the Man City defender. Who have got me a combined, 12 points. We've got Saka, Rashford, Martinelli and Salah in midfield, which again feels very template, I think, across the board. They haven't really done much for me this week, as you can see. Salah just consistently letting me down at the moment. Saka, the assist, should we touch on it now? Is that an assist or not? Because
I wasn't very happy. I was not happy. What's your view?
Like sort of 13% or something. So one of the players we can actually cheer for, you know. At the end of the day, you're the guy that knows these rules and stuff. For me, FPL is a game where they give assists that aren't Opta assists all the time. And I know they've got rules that govern that. To me, that goal doesn't happen without Saka being involved in it. That's what I would say idealistically is an assist for the game. Saka makes the goal happen. You can point at it has a slight deflection off of Sessegnon and blah, blah, blah. But to me, is that not then, well, he's hit it into Sessegnon, and Sessegnon's is it on target? If it's on target, then is it not Sessegnon's own goal? And then he just makes the fuck up of the save, essentially?
That was my point. If the deflection took it on target, that should then be a Sessegnon's own goal. Although, I guess they argue that Lloris made the original save and then with the second movement knocked it into his own net with his arm. So even if it was on target, they're saying it's a Lloris own goal. And because Opta immediately went to Lloris own goal, they weren't going to then look back and go, oh, what's the touch? Did the touch take it on target and should we give it a Sessignon instead? They weren't going to move it from one player to another if it's an own goal, right? So once they'd gone with that, it's done. And then I think I can see the logic of why they didn't give it, because they're saying that without the touch from Sessignon, it wouldn't have got to Lloris. It would have gone across the goal. And so without the touch, it wouldn't have been an own goal from Lloris. But my argument is the intention from Saka is to fire it across the box. So if Sessignon's touch wasn't enough to put it on target, it was only a slight touch, it was still going across the box. That was the intention of the cross. Therefore, I think he should have got it. And I know why it wasn't given. I think it's fair enough, but you're absolutely bang on, Luke. The reason why they do fancy assists, the non-Opta assists, is to increase the number of points in the game. And so this is an example where they kind of went against the kind of idea behind it. And that's what jars a bit.
Just feels a little bit harsh, that's all. I mean, I accept it at the end of the day for the reasons you've said, but it just felt a little bit harsh, especially when it's one of the few players you can probably cheer in on a game week. So, yeah, it is what it is. I made up for it, though, with Tony, who, that was never a penalty, was it? He got a penalty, got me 9 points.
He locked arms with him and dragged him down. He knew exactly what he was doing. Very clever. Yeah.
Never a penalty. I mean, I think this is the first time I've actually owned Tony, so now I know what it feels like to actually receive those points, because I often feel the other way around, where he somehow sort of jams a points, even though not being particularly involved in the game, and then ends up with some penalties, which invariably he scores them. Do you know what went through my mind for the first time of owning Tony when he stepped up to take that penalty?
Miss it.
Exactly. I thought I was going to claim his first ever miss. But
that's the trouble. When you own Tony, you think, oh, well, of all the players in the Premier League, I shouldn't be nervous about this because he's going to score it. But you actually think, don't you? You think, but it will just be my luck that the one he misses. And were you feeling exactly that? Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I was convinced it was going to happen. Poor me, I'm always playing the victim in this game. But Mitrovic is another example of that. I mean, was it 2 penalty misses and a ban now in like 3 weeks or something? It's unbelievable, really. I think that was really unfortunate. But I understand that one at the end of the day. It's a foul, isn't it? So they have to call a foul, and the fact he scores it's irrelevant. It's just a foul from the moment he hits it. So, unfortunately, I have to take that one on the chin. I don't know whether it'll be on penalties anymore, and we'll talk about that. I'm not sure whether he will be. It seemed like the noise from it was a little bit different this week compared to the last time he mixed it. Last time he was very confident, no, Mitrovic will take it. And this time he was like, he can sort of, but we'll see. That doesn't sound good.
Yeah, the doubts are creeping in. And it'll be Andres Pereira who'll probably take them anyway. So it's just we probably won't likely start Andres Pereira, will we? That's the thing. So I think I'm going to start Mitrovic at home to Spurs, and so are you, right? So yeah, it will be a problem if it'll be the next run of luck with Mitrovic if he doesn't take the next one, right? So
yeah, well, it could be a blessing the way it's going. But I mean, to be fair, Mitrovic, I think he racked up about 1 XG in that game in a very tough away game. So forget the penalties, he's still just a really good option, still a handful. Yeah. So I'm fine with holding him, to be honest. And then Haaland, like everyone, sat there as my captain. So I actually ended up taking out Chalobah, who I was convinced wasn't going to play, who got a clean sheet. I think he got bonus as well. As you can see, what I mentioned right at the start about just being happy with your team, I could have just started Chalobah, hoped he played. He would have got me more points. If he didn't play, which I thought was going to happen, I've got Gabriel and Dunk, who both ended up getting points as well, who would have come in. So at the moment, I took a hit for Ake, who's got 1. So I really need him, like you, and as I've got Edison as well, to keep that clean sheet versus Spurs, especially when I don't have Kane in my team as well. So that'll sort of make or break whether my week will be, at least a little bit good or not, as to whether Man City keep the clean sheet. So we'll see. So
talk to me about the triple captain, because I thought you hadn't done it, and as and I haven't. What was your thinking behind that? Was it purely that you felt the X-Mins was in his favour? Because it was for 20, right? Was that the decision?
Pretty much, yeah. I think that's the main reason. We could pretty much guarantee that he would play. Famous last words. We haven't seen the Spurs lineup yet, but That was the main reason. The fact that I want to focus my chips in the other double game weeks in other ways. I don't want to be tempted into other things. And I also just think, you're talking to a man who has had some success from this. I had the Bale triple captain, but I still think it is very much a throwaway chip, essentially getting 1 times more than everyone else, because presumably most people will captain Haaland. And ultimately, I still think it can be a good decision. He could do well against Spurs. All he needs to do is get me something, and I'd be more than happy with that. So yeah, those were the main reasons, really. It's also like it is the whole bird in the hand thing, worth 2 in the bush. It's the fact that Haaland might be injured later. We've already seen that he's been injured for it was actually a relatively large period of time. He just got lucky that it was over the World Cup. I think that could have been more catastrophic if it happened at a different time during the season. We know that he's got a history in that area. And there's just literally no guarantees that later there will be a situation where the double game week ends up being better and Haaland is the one. So I made up in my mind that I wanted it to be Haaland. So that all contributed to it.
Yeah, I mean, if he blanks against Spurs, it'll be 3 successive blanks, which again will be a run of luck, which you really wouldn't have expected. I think he's only just gone 2 successive games.
I thought it was 3 already. Maybe I've made that.
No,
up.
I don't think it is. I think he's gone 2 successive games for the first time now, blanking with that blank, and it will be 3 in the Premier League if he does so tomorrow night. I think that's the way it goes. So it would be a turn of events that we wouldn't expect. I mean, I think when everyone saw a lot triple captain in Haaland, they were like, well, they're going to get at least 1 return, at least, right? So that was the minimum we expected. So we'll see what happens tomorrow night. So we're going to talk a lot about chips. I'm not going to put the ticker up. I'm just going to go straight to Ben Crellin's recent tweets. A couple of tweets that he put up this week. It's almost every week we have to call on Ben Crellin and his Twitter. If you don't follow him at Ben Crellin, it's absolutely essential at this moment in time to follow him. There is another essential source of information you need to check in with, which I'm going to give you in a moment. Anyway, Ben's tweets recently, he's just given us a schedule up to game week 32. There's blank game weeks to come in game week 25. We're expecting 2 blank fixtures affecting 4 teams. And then game week 28, game week 32. So there's going to be 3 sets of blanks coming, and we know that. So he's estimating 19 blank fixtures moving. Big, medium, double game weeks in 29, 34, 37. We'll have a look at all that in more detail in a moment. The game week 22 deadline is February, and we get lots of information on the upcoming blanks and possibly double game weeks in the gap between 21 and 22. So sitting here now, Luke, we're kind of playing guesswork, aren't we? We know that there's going to be information coming that's going to shape our strategy in the midterm, but right now we don't know it.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's obviously with teams that are quite well owned and quite well sought after as well, because I don't know if you feel the same, but at the moment there feels like there's about 4 or 5 teams in the league that you even want players from, and it's these players that are potentially involved in the blanks in particular, well, in the doubles as well, coming up in 22 with Man United looking likely, and then the blanks in 25 involving probably Newcastle and possibly Manchester United as well.
How dare you? Yes, very likely, yeah.
Yeah, and then Brighton potentially have a say in that as well, and they're obviously quite sought after at the moment. So yeah, it does feel very much like waiting. Information is power. It feels like a game week to try and just sort of sit, doesn't it, and see what happens. Essentially, let the game week come to you, which it's not the most exciting, but it's part and parcel of the game, isn't it? Patience is a skill.
It is, and are you going with that strategy when it comes to your transfers now? Because you asked me if I was making a transfer, and you kind of presumed I was not going to. Is that your take now? You're going to try and save transfers until we know more?
Yeah, to be honest, I've waited every single time, I think, or pretty much very close to when we've got all the information as well. And I've tried to save whenever I can, really, most of the time this season. And it has helped me. But again, it's almost self-serving in the fact that when your team's doing well and you're not getting injuries and you haven't got issues in your problem, you can do that and it's not a problem. That can very quickly change. Like last week, I had to take a hit because of the fact that the Man United double game week came in, had Digne injury, had Darwin injured. That all happened in the space of a few weeks. So you have to react. So it's always down to the individual and their team, I would say. But as a general rule, waiting is definitely the play at the moment for me. I think for most.
Well, what's interesting, and I saw a tweet from FPL Focal, friend of the show, Oscar, of course, today, where he said someone had slid into his DMs and said, we're going to hear very soon about the double game week in 22. And we feel that is going to be Man United because their fixtures are an issue. They could have up to 4 fixtures to reschedule. And if they progress in the cup competitions as we perhaps expect, they will only have 3 game weeks or 3 midweeks to which to house those 4 potential postponements. So it means that there's urgency to get some of United's fixtures played. So we think, Ben Crellin thinks this, Focal certainly does, there's going to be a double announce where United will either play Leeds or Brentford. And what's interesting is, if it is the Leeds game, which is meant to be the favoured one, they'll play Leeds back-to-back. They'll play at home against Leeds, I believe, in Gameweek 22, and then they'll go away straight away in Gameweek 23 to Leeds, so back-to-back. That wasn't what we'd expect, but it does sound like it could be very possible.
Yeah, I'd much prefer it to be the other one, just simply because I've got Tony sat in my team. He might be banned by then, and then it won't matter. But if he's not banned, then that'll fall very nicely for me, and I could take every bit of luck I could have at the moment. So I'd prefer that. If it does end up being Leeds back to back, it doesn't feel right, does it, to have those games back to back? And there's probably a large policing presence, I would imagine, given the nature of the game there. So I'm not 100%, but at the end of the day, what do I know? This is why we have Ben Crellin and these guys, very clever guys, working it out for us. So, yeah, if it happens, it does make Leeds interesting as well, I think, in terms of, well, for obvious reasons, they've got a double game week, but trying to pin down who you want from them is quite a task as well. So definitely questions to ask. And just waiting to see who it is still the play, I think.
We'll look at that in a minute. Brentford's the other possibility in that that's the fixture in Game Week 25 that they could move forward in anticipation of United getting through, of course, which is a bit cheeky as a Forest fan, but, So it could be Leeds or Brentford. At the moment, the popular opinion is it will be the Leeds game, and we will get that back-to-back. Looking at Leeds' last 6 game weeks, next 6 game weeks, Leeds will play United away and Forest away in that Game Week 22, if it does drop in, before they play United at home in 23. Then they go to Everton, then at home to Southampton, unless Southampton get through to the Carabao Cup, of course. Then away at Chelsea, then at home to Brighton. So not a great run. Any names there in those tables that jump out? I guess it's Rodrigo at a push.
Yeah, he's the one who's really appealing. I think it's unfortunate timing, isn't it? Because I believe Bamford is back in training now, isn't he?
Well, he came on for 24 minutes, as you see, and sort of got the goal. So he's definitely a factor now.
He is. So it couldn't be worse timing there. I know they can both play together. Rodrigo can play behind him. I don't think that's his best position, though. And obviously the penalties becomes an issue there because I think Bamford has taken them whenever he's on the pitch ahead of Rodrigo. I could be wrong, but he seemed to be the favoured penalty taker until Rodrigo sort of stepped in. So that takes away from Rodrigo quite a lot. Rodrigo is definitely the one I would want. The thing is, Bamford could solve all this for us and just get injured again the way it's been going for him, unfortunately. I don't want to wish an injury on him, but if one of them could somehow remove themselves from the picture, that would greatly help that scenario. Outside of that, I think the option, they're so cheap, all these other guys, it would essentially be just playing with your edge pieces, wouldn't it? It'd be those that are willing to do a Pereira to one of these other guys, if they're available, or maybe a Martinelli, or in that spot that you could maybe move on. I've got Kepa, and you've got Kepa, I think. I think Kepa to Meslier looks pretty good move. I looked on review and it liked that a lot for the double game week. So that's probably what I'd have in the back of my mind, is to have Kepa to Meslier, and then I'd look at the situation with Rodrigo, maybe be tempted or not. I do think there's actually a very slight chance that in 25 Leeds could also blank if the fixtures went perfectly. So what you could find is that you would jump on for the double and then quickly have a problem for a blank. So in other words, it might be better just not to bother because it's going to cause you too much hassle.
Hence the Meslier move, because goalkeepers, you haven't
right, because he can just sit on my bench and never play again, essentially. Yeah, so that's why that one appeals to me. I just wanted to add, have you ever had a DM, by the way? Has anyone ever slipped you a DM with information like this? Because I need to get in this group.
No one's ever slipped me a DM like that. I used to get DMs when I was working, when I did Scout, from people saying, I've got this really good player, can you come and have a look at him? Honestly, I got literally about 50 a month like that. Where they thought,
really good player, come and look at
they thought I was a real scout. And I should go over to, I don't know.
Oh, I'd have loved that.
Gambia somewhere and watch this player. Honestly, I was getting loads. I was getting videos sent me of players.
George Weah's cousin.
like Sunday League players playing and go, oh, this player deserves a Football League contract. Can you do anything to help? Yeah, honestly. And I did have the heart to reply to him going, I fancy football. Have you heard of that? And because it would have been...
Could have conned them for all they're worth. Yeah, I'll come along. You've got to take me out for dinner, though. We'll have a chat. We'll sit round. I'll get a contract out.
Delia saying I don't read my DMs. How dare you, Delia? That is true. I do get a lot of DMs. I leave my DMs open, so I get... Oh, that's my fault, isn't it? But yeah, but I don't get those scouting DMs anymore. I think you're right with the Leeds. Melier is a goalkeeper I've always wanted to have in my team since he arrived in the Premier League, and I've never once had him. So it would be kind of nice little dalliance to have him if they did drop in on 22, I think, and play him in that. Obviously, De Gea is an option as well. Would you rather have Melier because of the money, I guess?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, if you ask me who's going to score more, it'd probably be De Gea in that week. But we all know that when it comes to double game weeks and goalkeepers, there's all sorts of scenarios that play out. And just having that cheap guy, like I said, the benefit is just to leave him afterwards and not have to worry about it, not to have to almost waste the transfers. It's essentially one in and then just leave him on my bench because I've got Ederson. Although the way he's playing, Meslier might find his way into my team more often. Yeah, so that's the appeal with the goalkeeper situation. Somerville was obviously quite interesting. Notto as well. There's quite a few people I think who are only playing with two up front, and if they have the money in the bank just to do, I mean, I presume it'll be Greenwood on most people's bench and just do the straight swap from Greenwood to Notto. That kind of makes sense, I guess. But I don't know if we're talking about players who are going to return that many points, I'll be honest with you. Notto certainly looks a hell of a player. And it's always worth a go in a double game week, I guess. But you've then got the impact of, okay, well, Greenwood's 4.2, Notto's 5. That's 0.8 you've then tied up in a bench player that presumably you don't want to start very often.
Yeah,
so,
I don't think I'd be changing my team structure for this double game week. If I had Greenwood, that swap makes sense. But you wouldn't be selling your Mitrovic or your Tony to get a double game week Leeds player up front. So
I don't think so, no.
I mean, Tony could be an option, though, because Brentford could be the team that drop in instead of Leeds, as I said. And I guess in that line, looking at these players here, I guess it's Wissa a push as well as a midfield option.
I guess so, but they can sometimes play two up top, can't they? They can sometimes do that, and then Wissa usually, it doesn't really work out for him. I think Tony and Mbeumo are the main two, and then Wissa's sort of in and out. So I'm not sure I'd be 100% confident in that.
But again, the goalkeeper, Raya, you could go to straight away, right? So that's going to, I think that's a popular option because Brentford have got United in 25, or would have, but that's the fixture that's moving forward. So they would, I guess they would blank in 25 because of this, right? So
I think they're on his list at the moment. I was looking, they are definitely one of the teams to potentially blank in 25.
Yeah, so basically, if the fixture gets moved forward, they will get the blank in 25, presumably, unless another fixture gets moved in. So going Raya would mean that you've not lost much, as long as you've got a first choice keeper who can play a call. So not great shakes there. I mean, would you go a third United player at all? Everyone's got Rashford and Shaw, right? So
yeah, I think, am I right in saying in 22, is Salah, I think let me just remind myself, it's not a fantastic fixture, if I remember right. It's away to Wolves, okay. So it's all right, but I think in the situation there, I could, if that happens, just do Salah to Bruno. That would probably be my favoured option. If Man United versus Leeds, I know it's different managers and a different time, but that fixture's got history for Bruno as well. It'd be nice if you could find a hat-trick in that one. I think that's the obvious play. I think Shaw and Rashford are just the clear two. At the moment, you clearly can't trust Martial. If Weghorst can force his way into the team and Martial's out for a sustained period, then I very much do like that. Despite, I think I was on this podcast last time when Weghorst was a thing, but
he could become a big thing if he scores tonight, right? Because he's making his first United start. So
it's definitely a big thing. Yeah, he's. Have you seen his pressure stats? By the way, he is utterly ridiculous. That guy, for a guy who is so huge,
he works.
He works hard. Yeah, his pressure stats were at one time the best in Europe, which was crazy. Yeah, so I think that's part of the appeal there for Ten Hag because he very much likes that. And he keeps talking about pressing all the time with Martial, which I'm not quite sure I see that, to be honest. So I wouldn't be surprised if he manages to work himself into the team.
Yeah.
So maybe he's an option. But outside that, it's basically doubling up on the defence in some ways, isn't it? I don't think you can trust anyone else in the team particularly. I mean, Eriksen's a nice player, but I'm not sure.
No.
It's similar to what you've already shown with the Brentford and Leeds guys. It's who do you want to lose in midfield as well to get these guys. The midfield seems fairly secure. There's just so many good picks that we want that these guys, even if they are slight options, it's just hard to find a spot for them. You want to play with your defenders and maybe your third striker. That's about it.
Yeah, that's it. It's limited slots that you're willing to sacrifice because you don't want to burden your team with a double game week player for a short term and then suffer. We've all been there where we've made a short term change for a double game week player. Then that player, you've said to yourself, I don't want to keep this player long term, but he's ended up staying there because of the fires you've had elsewhere. And that's what we've got to avoid with this. It's good to look ahead to the double game weeks as we're doing, but you've got to be cautious when committing too much to them because so often we don't capitalise on them. You're trying to pick one player in that Leeds team, for example, that's going to get the points when one of the fixtures is United away. It's not a great double game week scenario, but the temptation to try and cash in is always there, isn't it?
Absolutely. I do think they are. Just to give a counter, I do think double game weeks are undervalued because of our experience. We do remember the bad ones. There are plenty out there that have been absolutely fantastic, but it's got to be a situation like you mentioned where you're doing it and it's probably also an improvement for your team or a very easy fix, because losing transfers in the quest for it is the main issue. It's really valuable. Like I talked about right at the start, having to then take hits to fix things. It can truly rip your team apart having to do that all the time. So it's a very tricky balance and it's going to be dependent to every individual's team.
Well, we just had it, haven't we? I mean, I spent 4 points, but I did it to go Trossard to Rashford because I had to get Rashford because he's a player I want long term. And I moved White out to Ake because Ake had the double now. He's got a double in 23. And actually, I wanted another City defender because I feel that with 5 good defenders, I can rotate that City defender and play them when I think they're going to play. So the rotation doesn't worry me too much. Plus, I wanted White out of my team so I could free the slot up for Odegaard. So that's a very good example of what you just said there. I've gone and used a hit in a double game week, but with a long-term strategy in mind. And I think that's what you have to think like. You've got to make sure that you're making moves that also set you up, either in terms of structure or in terms of long-term targets. There you can benefit not just from the short-term double game week, but long-term as well. That's kind of the key, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And if you can use an edge piece to do that, Brighton are pretty much perfect, right? With all these very cheap players that we want to jump on, and the likes of Pereira and the third striker and whatever. I mean, they're the kind of team where you'd be happy to jump on them, right? Because the fixtures are so good for a sustained period. The price of them is mental. It's just the fact that they've got a blank in 25. So that's potentially a blank in 25. So that's the negative there.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. I've brought up Mikhail Topfam's table, which we use every week really now because he does represent the blanks and doubles in a really clear and precise way. And this shows a few things. The potential of the double in 22, which he's got at 1.6 for United and Leeds. He doesn't put Brentford there as a possibility, interestingly. So he's definitely in the camp of going, it's going to be the Leeds fixture that drops in for United. Then we've got the known double in 23 where City and Arsenal play twice, of course. Then we move on to game week 25 and the blanks highlighted in red, where, I mean, this is based on odds of reaching the Carabao Cup final. United and Newcastle are most likely to blank, and therefore their opponents, Brentford and Brighton, are the most likely to go with them. So you talk about Brighton being a great investment, and there's even a chance they could get a double. Well, we thought they could get a double in 21. It's not going to happen now because it's too late. But still, their fixtures over this next 4 are very, very strong. If we look at Brighton, they play Leicester in 21, Bournemouth in 22, Palace in 23, and then they go to Everton in 24 before the blank. That's a fantastic run, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of it. Everyone knows it comes down to the individual's team, but if you can use an edge piece to maybe jump on some of that and use it, and then you can afford to bench them if it ends up being the blank, then fine. But you've got to work out how many potential blankers you've got in your team already. But you could make the points up in the meantime, right? That's the other part of it. So it's very much a judgment thing. If you really think that they're going to score enough points where you could afford to even hit them or do whatever later on, then it's kind of fair enough. But it's tricky because, like I say, the teams that we really want at the moment, this looming 25 blank, we really need the information on it to help us. And that's why I come back to just saving. saving at the moment, if you can get away with it, is still the optimum thing, given that they're so cheap as well. I know they're going up in price, a lot of the Brighton boys, but it's probably not much of an impact, I would say, overall, because we're talking about players that are in the bracket of like 5 to 6 million, even cheaper, I think, in some areas. So, yeah, probably best still to wait on them.
It's actually Fulham they play in 24, so it's Leicester away, Bournemouth in 22 at home, Palace away in 23, and then it's Fulham at home in 24, before a likely blank because they would play Newcastle away, and Newcastle are expected to progress to the Carabao Cup final if they beat Southampton. A big if, obviously. Southampton turning the corner maybe under Nathan Jones. So, yeah, I'm with you on the Brighton thing. I'm looking at it this week, in fact, when we get to our teams later on. I said to you that my transfer would be Zaha to Odegaard, but actually I'm thinking that I could go Pereira out to one of those Brighton boys, as we talked about. And we're going to look at midfield data in a bit and where they figure. But I do think that, yeah, that short-term value over those 4 weeks, but all you've got to do, though, you've got to think about this blank game week 25. And we'll bring up, this is the ownership of the players that could be, well, this is the top owned players, the most popular players that could blank in game week 25. Now, obviously, if Newcastle and United get to the final, a lot of teams will be suffering the loss of Trippier, Rashford, Luke Shaw, possibly Pope, possibly Botman, possibly Almiron. So those are the players that are most likely, and perhaps Shaw as well, most likely to be missing from the squad. So most of us are going to have maybe four players missing if it's Newcastle United as expected. And as you know, that means that we've got to prepare for that. We've got to look at that now and make sure that we're not bringing in other players on this list to perhaps expose ourselves to that risk.
Yeah, I've got 4. So I've got Trippier, Rashford, Tony, and Shaw at the moment. So yeah, what's that? Most of the top 6 there I've got, which is not ideal. But that's one transfer, right, that could fix that as long as my edge pieces can play in that particular game week. And like you, I'm set up relatively well with the fact that most of my defenders are around that 5 million mark. I'm happy to play any of them virtually any week. So it's not too bad for me, but I can't really see from that list here who people, I mean, nearly everyone's got Trippier. It says 68 there. Is that 68% of people?
Yeah, 68% of teams got him. Yeah.
Okay. And Rashford, I think, his EO this week was 100%, right? So I'd imagine most of the people we're competing with have also got him. So yeah, it's the other guys that you can probably start to play with. But those two, I can't imagine many people will want to lose them because there's also the value that they keep accumulating, and they're just good picks after that. So it's really finding at least 2. You know, Trippier and Rashford are going to get benched, basically, is what I'm saying. So you're going to need at least 2 alternatives. And it would be ideal if Brighton did actually play that game week, because then the Matoma move would make sense. But I think Pereira, Fulham likely to play in 25. I think they actually are, aren't they, as far as I'm aware?
Fulham will play. They'll play Wolves on the Friday, so they're the opening game week. So Pereira could come in very handy if you've got him, because obviously he can come in. So he's a player that, if you've got Trippier, Shaw, Almiron, and one of Tony or a Brighton player, then you've got to bear that in mind. Because if it's a Newcastle United final, it's also Brentford and Brighton that go with them. They're the teams that miss out. And given that, you know, Tony's picking up some traction now, obviously, even though he's got the potential ban hanging over him, his form is good. And Brighton, we've already touched on, are very, very popular at the moment. So you've got to be cautious. I've got a Stupinan already. I'm looking at it and thinking, I'm not sure if I can actually risk going Matoma or March or McAllister at the moment, because that would just increase that quota that I'm potentially taking into game week 25. So it's really weighing up the short-term gain on Brighton versus taking that risk forward. Because I think it is fair to say United and Newcastle, not only they're the favourites, but they play at home in the second leg as well. The draw there was really cruel to Southampton and Forest. So you've got to say they're overwhelming favourites, those two. So in all likelihood, it is Brighton and Brentford that miss out. So how are you feeling about Tony? I mean, you're going to get rid before 25 with this in mind. Obviously, you're going to know, aren't you? You're going to know before 22.
Yeah, I'm just going to wait for the information. Yeah, he's going to stay in my team to the point where he either gets banned for his other activities, or, you know, if he misses 25, then I'll just look at it when it comes to it and see what the options are. I mean, Wilson's the guy where I kind of have a long-term view where Wilson will probably come in for Mitrovic or Tony at some point. But obviously, we just talked about they're likely to blank in 25 as well. Outside that, just looking at the fixtures in 25 or just strikers in general, it's hard to find one you'd actually want. So I think that's why a lot of people have gone back to 3-5-2 sort of setup. It could be a bit of a mess, that 25, to be honest with you. I mean, what other strikers would you even want to get in that set of fixtures? I mean, you don't know for sure who will be playing up front for Leeds.
I can tell you now, I've got Eddie Nketiah and he's at Leicester. So if you haven't got the 3 Arsenal, that's where you go, isn't it? I would have said.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have got 3 Arsenal, haven't they? I'm one of them, and I think quite a lot have. But yeah, he's probably the standout. Absolutely. Outside that, Darwin, back to Darwin. Can going to play?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, like Darwin's, we know he's gonna bang soon. So you might well time it right. But Palace isn't an easy game, the way that Liverpool are playing. But then, they've gone there previous years and absolutely spanked them when they've not been playing well. So, Liverpool are very, very hard to predict at the moment. But
I guess I'm missing Kane as well, because a lot of people have actually got Kane, so they don't have to worry about that situation. But I haven't got him. So yeah, I think Darwin will be appealing again to a lot of people. To be honest, I know he's heavily memed, but at the end of the day, those stats are just so good, and there's not that many options. And like I say, there's money floating around, so I wouldn't be surprised. If Mitrovic comes off penalties, Tony gets banned, you'll see if people go back to Darwin. I think they will, because they probably won't be able to get to Kane, and there's not too many other options.
Yeah, I mean, Mitrovic home to Wolves and Nketiah away at Leicester. I've got those too, so I'm looking all right for 25 in terms of my strikers. But I could be in trouble in defence because I've got Trippier and Shaw and I've got a Estupiñán. So that's 3 defenders who are likely to miss out, leaving me with Doherty and Ake. And what Doherty's at home to Chelsea is all right. Ake, who may not play, is at Bournemouth, is okay if he's playing. His former club, so perhaps he will. Not that that's a factor, but it might well be. So I've got to get a defender in for 25 and hope that Ake plays. So I've got Sandra, as we touched on earlier. Aslow's even worse trouble because he's got Botman and Trippier and Shaw, and then he's reserved at the moment. Patterson, who's crocked, and Bueno, who's away at Fulham, who's all right, but you wouldn't want to play that. So he's really got to think about it.
Absolutely. I'm in basically the same situation. I've got Dunk over your Estupiñán, but apart from that, it's pretty much the same team. So same problem. This is why I went Digne to cover this sort of thing. And I thought it was an all right move for that reason. But really, what I should have done is gone Mings, apparently, because he's just as likely to play. Covers the 25. He actually got assist and a bonus as well in the game where Digne.
And Villa went and bought a new left back. They bought Alex Moreno, haven't they? So it's like you couldn't have seen that coming, could you? I
mean, we know he's the biggest troll in the world, but that was taking it to new levels. It was before he'd even kicked a ball as well.
I know.
Luke Shaw went and scored 15 points and scored his 3rd ever goal. And it's like, for God's sake, before he even takes to the pitch, he's never matched.
Dina finds new ways of hurting us. That's why I just don't want to go there, because you just know what's coming. Right, before we talk about chip strategy, I want to draw attention to Planet FPL. We talk about them quite a lot, and Naz calls them FPL Planet cruelly. But I want to big up the Planet FPL as always, and in particular the latest episode, the one before last, episode 28, the Chip Strategy podcast. If you're sitting here now and you're wanting to decode the chip strategy situation, you need to listen to this podcast. I sat and listened to it and I was sitting there taking notes, and a lot of what we're going to go through in a moment is based on what I heard in this podcast. Suj and James are fantastic presenters always, but James just gets hold of this chip strategy situation and rinses it to death. He's done it once in this podcast. He's going to do it again in a couple of weeks after the FA Cup 4th round. So that's essential listening as well. But do not miss out on this podcast. If you miss out on this podcast, you're missing out on points. Simple as that. Right. Chip strategy. In that podcast,
God, kind of look at it.
I know, right? So these are the game weeks 21 to 38. Game weeks we got left. I'm showing here potential situations. So this is what the potential doubles and blanks could be. And then the possible chip played in that game week. And then after that, I've got some strategies. I've got Ben 1, Ben 2, which are the 2 strategies that Ben Crellin has talked about. So he's already been thinking about his chip strategy. And then I've got some other strategies in there, which James spoke about on that aforementioned podcast as well. But there are more you can do. But the point of this is to just make it clear that it's never too early to start thinking about this, because there's going to be events coming up which affect the transfers you've got available. For example, we talked about the blank in 25. You want to be able to manoeuvre away from the players that could blank there, so you need transfers to do it. You don't want to be taking hits to take blank players out. I don't think anyone is going to play a free hit in that game week. I've said it's a potential chip you could play, but it's not in any of Ben's strategies or James's strategies discussed. I don't think many
throw
will.
that out there. I was going to say, do you think anyone in the engaged community will look to do that? Because on the face of it, there might be some people out there with maybe 6 or 7 blankers potentially if it does happen already.
Do you think so? I guess you've got to be very unlucky to have that many. I guess you would have Botman, Trippier, Almiron.
Triple Newcastle, triple Man United pretty much, and then either a 1 Brighton or 1 Brentford thrown in.
Could happen. Would you do it at that?
I mean, I wouldn't want to for the. I mean, this graph tells the story, doesn't it? There's potentially a lot more lucrative weeks to come that you'd want to use it in. But I do think the masses, not that maybe we're not necessarily competing against them, but we'll probably look to use that chip in that week in some circumstances. Because I think triple Man United and triple Newcastle was probably more regularly owned than we probably realise.
Yeah. How much are you thinking about your chip strategy at the moment? Are you already looking along these lines, or are you just going, no, I need more information first?
Pretty much more information. I mean, I keep tabs on it, but for me at the moment, the focus is, will Man United get that double in 22? I'll look to maybe Man United and maybe Meslier. I've got my worry about 25 with having the extra players. If I do move into that Man United player and then they bank, that will put me on 5. So then that'll be an issue. But I've got just enough transfers to cope with that in and out at that point if everything goes perfectly. So that's basically where I've got to. That's pretty much it. As you can see on one of Ben's strategies, by 29, potentially we want to use the wild card. So hopefully I can navigate that okay. But I'll just play it as it comes, I think. There's just too many permutations. I love all this stuff that these guys do. And I love listening to the pods for the possibilities. But I don't see how. I mean, I personally can't factor that in as a major thought process beyond sort of six weeks. My mind just starts going to mush. It's like, I'll see what happens. And then I'll kind of react to it. I have an overview of it.
What do you think about the potential that Rashford does get that Leeds fixture? And then, he's obviously got a couple of good games. Let's go back to the ticker and have a quick look what he would have. So in 22, he would have Palace at home and Leeds at home, which is strong, right? Are you looking at that already and thinking, maybe I should have saved the triple captain? Or are you thinking, well, it's like any other time, it's not a valuable chip, it's overrated?
No, I mean, my captain would be Rashford for sure, but whoever triple captains gets 1 times more. I don't see it as a massive issue. He'd literally have to score like 6 goals for it to be a massive impact or whatever, and he could do that. The fixtures are better for sure, and there's the penalty situation with when we're not 100% sure. I think that elevates him to a new level if we are sure that he does get them. Obviously, being a midfielder, getting the extra points, it's a lovely option. But I just think overall, it's quite easy to get carried away. Rashford is obviously a great player. Man United have massively improved. But we must add their fixtures have been very kind, outside of the Man City game, which you could argue, on another day they might have lost that if the ref didn't do what he did. So that's helped them a bit. And ultimately, Haaland is a player who runs at ridiculously high level stats consistently. And Rashford, like I say, has done that, but not to his levels, not to his levels at all. It's very much, I'd say, because he's scored so many in a row, and is clearly in form, and people feed a lot into that. He will, there will be people who will do it. Yeah. I still think Haaland is the better use of it. Maybe not necessarily this week, but in the future.
Well, Erling's got Spurs away in that week, so I don't think if Rashford does get the double, there'd be any hesitation, right? So everyone will be captaining Rashford anyway. So I think you're right. The advantage is not going to be. It's going to be 50%, right? So you're not. The triple thing is completely overplayed. So it's not going to be. It's not going to be a big thing, I don't think. But it feels, having kept the chip back, because I was like you, I was tempted by Haaland, but I just wanted a bit more information about what could unfold. And I guess my situation, my rank, I need to kind of take some risks. And I saw it as a manageable risk. And maybe it will come in for me and Rashford will get back-to-back goals in that game and so on. But we'll have to see. It's certainly going to be a nice turn of events if that happens for those who did keep the chip. Now, looking ahead to the strategies, and these are the 2 that Ben has put forward of what his current thinking is. He is looking at free hitting in game week 29, which is looking likely to be a major double game week. We think a lot of fixtures are going to drop into that game week, and therefore playing the free hit or the wild card then will enable you to set up for that. He's thinking in his first strategy, free hit in 29, wild card in 33, and then go into 34, probably with the bench boost, right? So if you've played your triple captain, that's the traditional way of playing the remainder of the chips. You would use your free hit either to get you through a blank or make you exploit a double. and then you'd play the wild card prior to another major double game where the bench boost would be rolled out. What's been your past relationship with that wild card bench boost strategy? Have you ever managed to pull off a good game week with that? Because I haven't.
None of them stick out massively. I mean, I think it's the usual thing though, right? In the popular weeks where it's going to be a double game week, most people are following roughly the same strategy, and we get roughly the same points. I can recall ones where it's been 100 plus and even some up to 200, but there's no guarantees, right? The past doesn't affect the future in that scenario. It just doesn't. So this could be the season where we hit that absolutely massive haul, and it's always going to be best used in those weeks. At the end of the day, if you get 15 players in a bench boost playing twice, your potential for points is through the roof. It is, and that's why we continue to do it. And that you'll never change my mind on that. It doesn't matter if they get 30 points and it's horrendous and no one turns up. It's not going to affect me for the next season. I'm going to do it again because the potential is there. One of the strategies I'm just noticing now, you could potentially, I think, maybe free hit in 32, wild card in 33, and then bench boost in 34. I think that works as well. Yeah. Because that double game week in 29, I don't know what, this is where I need to do the extra research, is I don't know what the fixtures will look like. But if that is a major double game week and it's for many of the players we already own, it might be a situation where there's not much you would want to change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you can use your transfers up to that. I guess the problem is, can you do that and get through 28 as well? Yeah. Because many of the teams that double in 29 will blank in 28. So you're either going to you're not going to be able to use transfers to do both. You're going to take the pain in 28 if you're going to benefit in 29.
Gotcha.
So that's why you've got to do something, I think, in 29.
Okay, so work your way towards the blank in 28, and then basically wildcard in 29 probably looks quite appealing then overall.
Ben's second strategy is just that. He's thinking of wildcarding in 29. He's going to free hit in 32 then. And his wildcard in 29 will already have him set up for the double in 34.
That's the only worry, isn't it? By then, that's a number of weeks where, it's just injuries. Outside of that, you can have a load of players suddenly go missing or whatever, and then your team's not quite set up as you'd like for the major double game week. But yeah, it's still on the back burner for me at the moment. It's still sort of lurking just outside of the picture.
Well, but we'll get more information after this game week prior to 22, after the Carabao Cup, of course. So we're expecting this to be firmed up as we go. So this graphic is going to live in this stream and on this podcast for weeks now, because I just think this is the part of the season where we get into this. We see it as our edge, don't we? And Ben Crellin is I describe Ben Crellin as a weapon. Well, I guess he is in our quest to get the edge, really. Because, if you follow that account, if you listen to the right podcast, if there are other people out there who really delve into the detail of these doubles and blanks, but we do see this as, your mate at work at the water cooler isn't going to know this kind of stuff, right?
Well, he is now, because he has to go on Twitter and it's easily accessible. Maybe. Or watch this. Yeah, it's a bit different. But no, your average person isn't going to know this. And that's why I say that first blank or this double that you'll get, you'll see quite a lot of chips used in the general game. But what can you do about that? Hopefully they're not players that will have any impact on us. Well, maybe.
Right. I want to talk about the restart. I want to look at some data now. What I'm showing is player data since the end of the World Cup and since the restart. So 4 game weeks gone. And a number of players this highlights that are talking points at the moment. So I've got a couple of tables to show. This first one is just points per 90, pretty straightforward. It's going to show the players that have achieved the most points per 90 over the last 4 game weeks. And at the top of that list is one Solly March. Now, we touched on Brighton just a bit already. What do you make? There's 2 players here I want to talk about, Solly March and James Ward-Prowse. These are 2 players that have been in the Premier League for a while. And probably if you're going to pick 2 players who you wouldn't expect to come out of this restart flying, it would be those 2. What do you make of this? And do you think they are now becoming serious FPL assets the way Almiron has already?
Well, first of all, I just think you've got to acknowledge that there's a lot of noise in the sample, right? We're talking 2, 3, 4 starts for a lot of these players. So you'd expect if you took a 4-game sample at any point during the season, it would be full of noise. Yeah. But I think it's fair to say in the case of March and Ward-Prowse that there are potentially other factors, so it's worth keeping an eye on. I mean, you've probably presumably been keeping up with the fact that Ward-Prowse seems to have been moved forward into this number 10 role.
Yeah.
which, that could change his output. It could do it. It's no guarantee. I don't think moving forward necessarily just suddenly makes you a fantastic option. I was looking on FPref, it was 0.30 over the last 365 days, expected goal involvement. So per 90, 0.30. It's not particularly good, but for a midfielder, it's not bad, which is where he plays. If that's suddenly going to change because he is number 10, then sure, we should take note, right? So we just have to be mindful, like I say, that it is very early, and it's very easy to have your head turned when he's just scored a worldy free kick again. We know he's on the free kicks, and as good as he is at them, it doesn't mean that he's just suddenly going to score every single free kick again. That's not going to happen. I think he scored two this season so far. How many could you see by the end of the season? There's a lot of luck played in that, but 3, 4 if you're lucky. So maybe another 2 on there. So yeah, for me, it's still very much a watching berth on Ward-Prowse. I'm interested because of the tactical shift, but we'll have to see. With Marsh, I think the fixtures and the price are good enough where it almost doesn't matter. I feel like if you can find a place for him, that's fine. I'd say with him, his stats are actually pretty damn good, and they have been good much of his career, considering his position. If you compare him to a fullback, this is or a wing back. Yeah, that's the thing. So he's at 0.32, so actually slightly above even Ward-Prowse over his career. The thing that's always been levelled as him is he can't finish, right? You see Az on here saying he's got no end product whatsoever.
Well, that's Trossard, but it could be any Brighton player, to be honest, because that's...
Absolutely. But I think he played in the front 3 recently. I think Gross actually played fullback and he played in the front 3. If you compare him to most of the other front 3 players in the league, 0.32 isn't great. It's not fantastic. So I repeat, I think he's fine for the price. The fixtures are fine. You have to bear in mind that blank. But, is he suddenly going to turn into a world star who's scoring loads of goals every week? I'm not 100% sure. I wouldn't have thought so. What's your gauge on it? I think the stats are good enough where if he was a defender, he would solve all our problems, basically. I think
we can't ignore the impact De Zerbi's had, because Sonny March's kind of growth as an FPL consideration has come off the back of De Zerbi's arrival and then the change tactically of how Brighton set up. The fact that they're more aggressive, perhaps, in their attacking play. And we've seen a number of their assets come to the fore as a result of that. Matoma, obviously McAllister, who looks like he's going to be playing a more conventional number 10 role now under De Zerbi. So I think it's exactly as you said. It's like, yes, the sample is small, but there are other overriding factors tactically that mean we have to look at this. We have to monitor it. It's like the Gundogan example from a couple of seasons back when he suddenly moved up front. Yes, Gundogan traditionally was a centre mid, maybe even in the double pivot and playing a more defensive role. When he moved up top, it unlocked his finishing ability, which was almost world class, wasn't it? So we had to take notice of that player and look at them differently. And I think that's the case with March and Ward-Prowse. Ward-Prowse has always got those free kicks, but if he's going to be more involved, and I'm going to show you a table in a minute which indicates just how much more involved he is, then we've got to consider it. So I think it's a wait and see for me. If I was picking a Brighton player now, I would probably go Matoma because he's the most exciting and probably the one we know least about, I expect, but the one who's emerging the quickest, in my opinion, in terms of the way he's becoming a factor in Brighton's play. He's almost becoming the player that unlocks opponents, that he's the one who runs at opponents, and he's the most direct and causes havoc. And I just quite like owning that type of player. If you were picking one of it's McAllister, Matoma or March. If you were picking one of the 3, where would you go?
It would be Matoma. Just to reel off his over the last 365 days, so just to give it some context. Obviously with Matoma, that's involved some other leagues as well, but it's at 0.53. So it's at least 0.20 more than the other guys. I think with him, the appeal is the fact that in that front 3, now that Trossard looks like he's out the door, you can categorically say that he will be playing in that role, right? I wouldn't have any concerns. Whereas I think with Marsh, I think you could see him occasionally play fullback, might even see him, maybe I'm wrong on this, but they've got a number of decent players, I would say, that can play a number of different positions. And I wouldn't say it's absolutely nailed on that he's going to play in the front 3. They've got Danny Welbeck's obviously coming back from injury. They've obviously got Ferguson, who's up front as well. Would he even change to a front 2 in some games? I don't know. I think I prefer Matoma, given they're both midfielders, and his historical data is better. But that would basically be it. I wouldn't be surprised if the thing with Matoma is he looks very good and he is fantastic. Is he going to be a player who scores loads of goals? I'm not 100% sure on that. His stats don't suggest as much. It might be that Mitoma makes things happen for the other players, which is what has been the case mostly at the moment. I was looking at who he most directly compares to on FPL out of interest, and there's some players in the Premier League that they've put. So Buendia is number 2 compared to him.
That's chilling. That's not really suggesting it's a must buy.
But also in number 3 is Martinelli.
Right.
Okay, so that interests me more. And to go back, in fact, if I go back to Marsh, when I compared him to wingers, so rather than fullbacks, it had Fornals down as the player most like his profile as well. So not that necessarily means anything, but it's just interesting to note. Like you say, there's been some factors that have happened in the last few weeks that make us take note. I think it's really exciting that these things change. This is what we have to look out for. These are the things that are extremely hard to look out for, like you said. When we've in an era where we've got models that can do this stuff over many, many weeks, look at historical data, be incredibly accurate over long samples, to notice a tactical shift in a player and then try and give it some credence and examine whether it's going to be a long-term thing or whether it's just noise is a skill, and it's hard, I would say. But I just want to repeat that the fact that they're so cheap and the fixtures are still relatively good, and in Southampton's case, they cover a blank, that I almost don't think it matters. You could kind of just go for it, and if it fails, then you can kind of change it later, right? So
yeah, and in both cases, it's new managers, isn't it? And when new managers come in, this is what we've got to watch for. The models can't watch for it. It will take them time to adapt to it. I mean, the models are still getting used to Almiron being what he is, right? So it's and many would say the models was right because he's starting to regress. And, it's going to be the case with these 2 players as well. It's going to take time for the models to pick them up, if they do at all, because they may well regress by the time, in 3 or 4 game weeks' time, this might not be a non-event, and they're not going to be in the conversation. I think there's something in it. I think they're definitely worth monitoring, and I think De Zerbi and perhaps Nathan Jones, his impact might be restricted to Ward-Prowse. I don't see any other asset in that Southampton team. I don't think Che Adams is going to be reborn. Do you, Luke? No.
I wouldn't have thought so. Seems a fairly safe bet. I'll never say never in fantasy.
No,
I've learned over many years. Yeah,
I guess not. Another thing I want to draw yourself to in this table before we move on is at the bottom of the table, under the top 30 that this shows, the top 30 players' points per 90. The title of this show is weighing heavy, and that is based on the fact that at the moment the heavy hitters have really struggled after the World Cup. And I know it's only a small sample, but the names here: Haaland, Salah, Trent, Robertson, Son, De Bruyne. None of these big players, and they're all over, they're all 7 million or more here, and 4 of them are over 11 million, have really delivered since we got back, have they? Are any of those players, I mean, I'm probably going to say De Bruyne, are any of those players worrying you?
They've been frustrating, but I just come back to that. When you look at that column there, XGI, non-penalty 90, those are still some high numbers.
Yeah.
Even though they haven't looked that good, even in this tiny sample, their numbers have still remained good. So, maybe I'm stubborn, but I think you look at the historical data, good. You look at the recent numbers, good. Yes, on the eye, they haven't looked great, but there's a lot of noise in football. Like I say, it's been 3 or 4 matches. They haven't performed at the top level. There's a lot of the time we are impacted as well by the results and stuff, and the media, the fact of a team can have a drop-off. Like Man City and Liverpool have clearly had a drop-off. Even the stats tell you that this season. They have had that. But I think they've also run bad as well. I think that they've also had that bad luck. And when that bad luck combined with running bad goes together, it makes it look worse than it actually is. And these players are good players. And I'm pretty sure that eventually they'll be able to sort it out. It doesn't always happen, but I can't really see a world where Man City, if we take Man City, they've just got world-class players everywhere. And they've got one of the best coaches in the world. So will they not fix it at some point?
Well, what I've got on screen now is the attacking data by teams since the restart. And Man City is still top. I believe they're top over the season. Let's have a look over the season. Over the season, it might... Well, yeah, they're top over the season. XG non-penalty per 90, 1.92. And even after the restart, so the last 4 game weeks, they're top with 2.23. So data-wise, there's nothing for us to look at and go, I'm concerned about City. It's purely the eye test. Now, is this an example of where the eye test gets in the way and actually distracts you from the reality, which is City aren't a bad attacking team. They're still as good, if not better, than they were before the break, and it's just variance that's at play? Or do you think the eye test is showing up some evidence that all is not well? Bearing in mind that Gundogan has come out and said that all is not well.
Yeah, but that's also impacted by the results, isn't it? That's the thing. I think the Man United game, you could have said they probably could have won that if that offside call didn't go that way. I know it ended up being 2-1. They weren't great in the game on my eyes in that game. There's been other games similar. The Everton game, I think they should have won that as well comfortably. So like I say, they have had the drop off a little bit, but it's also they've run bad, and that's just compounds it. So I think the eye test in that scenario can work against you, because I think you can convince yourself that these players aren't good, they're done, it's never going to happen again, or it's not happening, I'll jump off and then I'll come back when they're performing. But the thing with this is that it can happen at any point. It can snap like that. And that's the worry, isn't it? It's the fact that, I mean, Man City, when they came back, it was the League Cup game. I actually went to it versus Liverpool. And maybe you could say because it was versus Liverpool, were equally as bad. But I thought Man City were very good in that game. Very open, very offensive. You know, De Bruyne looked fantastic. They've had a couple of bad games. You know, it could continue. But I would, if I'm a betting man, I'd bet that Man City probably continue to perform as one of the top 2 teams in the league, and they will eventually sort it out. I think in the Klopp scenario, I think it's, I don't know what you feel, but again, I'd probably level the same at that. But I think with him, it's more of an issue where they have actually lost a number of players to injury. They've obviously got the whole midfield issue where they haven't really sorted their midfield out. They've lost a lot of the stuff that made them a really good team, which was the pressure off the ball, you know, with the high line combined was just out of this world, and they would literally destroy teams. You know, they've now lost Van Dijk as well, where some would even say maybe that's a benefit because he wasn't playing his top level. So I think with him at least, and maybe I'm being unfair here, it doesn't seem like Klopp really wants to change the way he's playing particularly. I think he seems to have pulled the fullbacks back a little bit. You notice that Trent and Robbo don't seem to be as attacking as they have. I think that's an impact of the rest of the team not being able to perform. But outside that, you know, he has tried the different formations, but it hasn't really worked. And I just wonder whether he will be able to find a solution there. You know, with Pep, he'll try everything until eventually it works, and maybe even to his own destruction. But do you think Klopp will sort it out or not? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Well, we're both sitting with Salah in our teams, aren't we? It's quite interesting when we talk about the failing heavy hitters. We didn't go De Bruyne for the double game week, and I'll ask you why you didn't do that in a moment. But I didn't, because I kind of did have some concerns about City, what I'd seen, and a perception that De Bruyne didn't look fully... I don't know. It didn't. Not that he wasn't playing well, but he didn't look like he had the energy levels that he had prior to the World Cup. And I don't know what was behind that. I don't know whether it was the World Cup, bit of fatigue maybe. But I was just concerned that De Bruyne wasn't the driving force in games. I'm looking at particularly at that Chelsea League game where I thought he was really disappointing. And so I just thought, I'm going to hold Salah because for once Salah could be a little bit of a differential, and Salah, like you say, could snap at any moment. We saw it in the Spurs game before the break, didn't we? When he went and got the return, and people have moved off him. So I thought I'll hold him, but long term, or mid term, I'm thinking, I think Salah to Kane is where I'm going to go. I think that what Kane gives you is that reliability. Where with Salah at the moment, I look at him and think, yes, he's going to explode. I'm going to miss a haul eventually. But Liverpool aren't playing well enough where Salah's in a position where he can deliver consistently.
Are Spurs playing well enough?
No, they're not. But Kane finds a way, I think.
Yeah, but is that not just the variance then? Because his numbers are worse than Salah and he has found a way. But is it not going to revert where Kane just stops scoring because he doesn't get as many chances?
It could do. It could well do. But I think when it comes to trust at the moment, if I was going to... I mean, arguably, there's no heavy hitter other than Haaland that we can trust, I would say.
And even him's not been great.
No, exactly. So if I've got to have another heavy hitter, I'm leaning towards Kane. Fixtures are good. And I just think that through adversity, he often finds a way of still ticking over. Whereas with Salah at the moment, I want to hold him and I want him to be that differential for me, because how often is Salah a player that isn't owned by the majority of players in the game? Not very often at all. A lot of move to De Bruyne, so the temptation is to hold Salah. But I am concerned about Liverpool. I want to give them more time before I make a call on that. But at the moment, I'm thinking it's likely I'm going to move to Kane.
I think the tick in the box there is the fact that we just talked about, there's not many forwards you want. So if you want Kane, you just leave him in there, and then that gives you that midfield spot to play with. And there are a number of other teasing options that we possibly couldn't go to.
Exactly.
Because we've got the template midfielder. I think that's fine. But just looking at the team attack data there, you see that Spurs are well off it. And I know Kane, he generally performs to his XG or above. We know he's an absolutely class player, but let's not forget that Salah still does get the chances. And I just think as well with the players returning and that they've still got a chance where he's going to be worthwhile. Like, it's hard talking up anyone at the moment, really, at the moment. It just seems like most players outside of Arsenal and Newcastle are very stagnant, and throw Man United in there as well, probably, and Brighton. But outside of that, it's struggling to see what teams are actually, what players are appealing from many of the teams. But it will change. I'm sure it will change. We can't have... the fact that we got in this situation in the first place showed that there was a change, right? It wasn't like this at the beginning of the season. It's gradually worked towards it, and I'm presuming it will gradually work away. Surely the impact of Liverpool's players coming back, I know that most of them are forward players, and the midfield's probably not going to be completely solved, will have an impact.
Yeah.
They've obviously signed Gakpo, he didn't look great the other night, but he's working his way into the team as well. I think Jota's in training as well, right? I think Jota made a big difference for Liverpool when he's been available. I think he's been a very good option. I don't know.
Are you giving Salah more time?
I don't see any reason to remove Salah outside of maybe to Bruno for that double and then probably back.
Right.
I just don't have anything to do with the money unless I was going to do what you do and switch it for Kane. And I just don't know. I feel by the time I do that, I'll want it back the other way again. If I could go back in time and have Kane over Salah for over the last 15 weeks, fine. But it doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, this is more fuel to the fire about not moving to Kane and maybe sticking with Salah. What I'm showing now is the key performance indicators tables on Fantasy Football Scout. This is where we get a lot of our data for the show, Fantasy Football Scout members area. And the KPI tables are a much neglected set of data. What it does, it enables you to compare one period of time and some key performance stats like minutes per shot in the box, minutes per shot on target, minutes per touch, minutes per chance created, and minutes per XGI. So you can compare one time interval to another. And what I've done to generate this data is compare the last 4 game weeks, which is obviously the game weeks after the restart, after the World Cup, to the game weeks prior to that, to try and find players that have improved markedly in key areas. And if you see a sell in green, forget the minus that you see, if you see a sell in green, that is an improvement. So in other words, Brennan Johnson, all right, don't want to big him up too much, his XGI per minute per XGI has increased by 92% since we got back from the World Cup. So in the last 4 game weeks, his minutes per XGI has gone up 92%. His chances created have gone up 81%. His shots in the box have gone up 35%. His shots have gone up 41%. So Brennan Johnson, much improved. Equally, James Ward-Prowse, if you look at the data here, and this points to the tactical change, his minutes per shot up 90%, his minutes per shot in the box up 136%, on target up 139%, and overall his XGI, minutes per XGI up 90%. Rashford, much improved. Solly March, much improved. It's what we'd expect, right? So this bears that out. If you go down to some of the heavy hitters, Salah's XGI, minutes per XGI, has only gone down by 9% or 9.8%, whereas Harry Kane's has gone down by 33% in the last 4 game weeks. So that would suggest that you're right, I should keep faith in Salah, not move to Kane yet, because actually, in terms of the data, Kane has had a bigger drop recently than Salah. Any other observations from this?
The fixtures are going to play a part as well, aren't they? Forest had some pretty good ones, if I remember rightly. I think Southampton, maybe Forest didn't have great ones, but Southampton certainly were on everyone's radar. Maybe not everyone's radar, but they had the best fixtures. They were I remember them being right at the top of the ticker on the restart. So I think that's probably bared some fruit there with Ward-Prowse. In terms of the heavy hitters, we've been through it. There's been a drop off, it seems, but I just think they'll come back. I don't think there's too much else to say on that. I hope that's the case. I don't want to live in a world where Brennan Johnson, Mark, Grealish, Nketiah, Damari Gray are the top picks in the game, and we have to sell all these other guys to get there. It doesn't feel instinctively right. It feels way too soon for that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think what this does, though, is it enables us to track it and to see who is for real out of this. And we mentioned Ward-Prowse and March already. Rashford, we know. And this just shows how much he has come
Bailey's a potential option. Bailey probably plays in the blank as well, playing up front, midfielder. A lot of us went there at the beginning of the season and it didn't have great results, unfortunately. But 4.5 million and basically playing up front, it's decent again, isn't it? It's just finding another midfield slot. We want another position, don't we, for that sort of thing? Yeah,
and I think that's why the move away from Salah is appealing, because it does open up the option to get these players in. You can get that Brighton midfielder. You could go to someone like Bailey. you can play with your midfield slots, whereas if you've got Salah in there, you've tied up 12 million. It's just, when is the right time to move off Salah to Kane? I think I want to do it, but this data makes me think I should show caution, because at the moment, you're absolutely right, Kane is struggling too at the moment, data-wise.
I mean, there's an argument. I mean, Az has pretty much got it, hasn't he? Although he's got De Bruyne. You can have all three of them because there's so many cheap picks in the game. Maybe that is the play. Maybe that is the way to do it, to have Haaland, Kane and Salah, or De Bruyne, and rotate them, or whatever you want to do. I mean, there's enough cheap players where you can do it for sure. It's just my team's not particularly set up like that. I've got too many 5 million defenders in that bracket for now, but I think there's other people that have got the likes of the Pattersons, the Buenos, and all those guys that can probably do it. So maybe that's the answer.
Almiron, his data's down a lot. So shots in the box down 75%, shots are down 42%. Do you think that's him regressing to the mean, or do you think that he will get back to what he was before the World Cup?
Well, similar to what I said before, his stats had massively improved, so we can't just completely write him off. There was a noticeable jump in his stats as well. It wasn't just running hot. He was, though, running hot, and his stats were good, and now he's probably not running hot. His stats have also dropped a little bit, but I think he's fine. I think Newcastle's games, still again at a cheap enough price, and Newcastle's games are good enough that I wouldn't worry yet. But yeah, this was always on the cards. There was no one, unless you're Lionel Messi, that runs at the rate he was running. We've seen it so many times over the years in fantasy football, where a player will just turn up and be ridiculous. 6-7 weeks, everything flies in, and then they disappear again. I don't think he's going to completely disappear, but there's no way you can continue running at that rate. It's just not sustainable.
Okay. So with that in mind, I'm going to mention another player to you, and I really want to get your views on this. Odegaard. Is Odegaard going through that kind of period where inevitably it will regress and Saka and Martinelli will be clear the best Arsenal assets? Or are we looking at a period where we're witnessing Odegaard become a player who's now pushed into the 9 million bracket?
I'll throw that back to you. You go. You want him, don't you? You tell me.
I do want him. And I do think that Odegaard could be not at this level to stay, but I think we are now seeing something nearer what he was going to sustain for a number of seasons now. I think that he's a player that has suddenly increased his goal threat and his effect and his influence in terms of that goal threat. I don't know how Arteta has tweaked the tactics to allow for that, but what we've seen is a different kind of player who can inflict more damage on an opponent now. He's always been creative, but I've witnessed an increase in his involvement in and around the penalty area to the point where he's obviously scored 8 goals over the season, which is more than Saka, and it's far more than Nketiah so far, but it's more than Saka and Martinelli. Martinelli, as this table shows, got 6 goals in 1,500 minutes. Saka's got 7 in 1,500 minutes, and Odegaard's got 8 in 1,400. Odegaard at the moment has performed like the better of the three. I still think Saka is the best of the 3 options, but I think Odegaard's level won't regress perhaps as much as we'd expect.
No, and the thing with Odegaard is he was always really heavily favoured by review, even last season. He was always in and around, and people used to take the piss. They used to say he can't, this is the reason why the machines don't know what they're talking about, because he's not an option. But his numbers were always good. I think we've seen similar players to him over, the number 10 is almost a dying breed, isn't it, in Premier League? He's more of an 8 and a 10, Odegaard, I would say at the moment, than anything. That's kind of found a position for him that's working. I mean, on the eye test, he looks like he's the best player in the Premier League at the moment. I don't think anyone would really hotly contest that. I have noticed, maybe similar to you, that when he does receive the ball, his just close control, his ability to use both feet and basically shift the ball into a position where he can fashion himself a shot seems to have just gone up to another level now. He seems to be able to generate those opportunities for himself. But yeah, the robots always liked him. I've always liked him. We're now seeing it bear out. And I think it's just a product of Arsenal are so good at the moment, just across the board, that you're able to get that player so high up the pitch and in those positions because they are dominating most teams in most areas. So that's what you want, right? The closer you can get him to the penalty area, the more chance he's got of those slightly long range shots actually going in. I'm with you. I still think Saka is the best option simply because I can't let go of penalties. And I think Saka's absolutely fantastic as well. I think in terms of set pieces, Saka was taking a lot of them and Odegaard seems to have taken a few more off of him, I noticed recently. So I think those two, if you were to ask me, are probably the 2 best picks. overall. But I don't think you can go wrong with the other ones either. I think they're fine. I actually was going to, so when the restart happened, I was talking to Sam, who's on Inspector Goals. I was basically saying I'm going to sell Martinelli and I'm going to get Odegaard instead, because Martinelli had gone up to 6.8. I think Odegaard was 6.4 at the time. So basically I would claim my 0.4, and then, because I had him since the beginning, Martinelli, and then I could just put it straight into Odegaard. And I really wish I had now, because he's been really, really good. And now obviously Odegaard's gone massively up in price, so it's not particularly an option. But yeah, I don't know which ones you favour. I think for me it would be Odegaard and Saka, just because of what they offer at the moment. And I think the third one's up for debate. I think you can still include the defence in this. I don't think we should just write it off. I've got Gabriel, and again, if you ask me in a wild card right now, would I maybe have Nketiah or Martinelli? Probably, but I'm happy with Gabriel. And I think in a world where there's not that many great defenders, he still is one. He just hasn't had the clean sheets of late, so I still like him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think this is, since the restart, Odegaard's turned in 35 points, Martinelli 23, Saka 24, and Eddie 17. So he is that level above at the moment. Will that continue? No, I don't think so. I think the others will get closer to him, but I don't think the Odegaard the player we thought we had going into the season, we have to forget that. He is now in that, I think he's going to be, I would say now 8.5, 9 next season, I'd say.
Oh yeah, I would have thought so. Carries on like this. Yeah, definitely. It's hard to, I mean, that's presuming they don't make any changes, right? And it's not, I'm not going to go through that again, midfielders as forwards and all that stuff. But if it was to stay, if they were to change that, then Odegaard would suddenly be in that De Bruyne bracket, wouldn't he? Where it's like they'd basically be the top midfielders, because they're basically midfielders who are essentially either number 10s or straight off as a shadow striker sometimes. So yeah, I think Odegaard's do a decent price rise, definitely. I mean, this kid had a massive reputation, didn't he, as well? Obviously, Real Madrid saw something in him very early as well. So it's nice to see it come through, and just watching him is just a joy. So ultimately, what's fantasy football about? It's not really about trying to win the thing and is it really? That's probably not going to happen. It's about enjoying your fantasy team most weeks, and Odegaard certainly ticks that.
Wow, I never thought I'd hear you say that. Okay, and you admitted to not enjoying it as much this year. I know I'm not going to go back there anyway, but yeah.
But it helps when he's also got really good stats. And, I'm sure there will. Is he going to score he scored 8 this season? Is he going to consistently score over 10 goals a season? Maybe not. Maybe he's running a little bit hot.
No, I think he's double figures now for goals and assists every season. I think
there's a chance in the future he may end up with penalties, to be honest. I think Saka kind of fell to him, and he's done fine with them. But I would have thought, it's always hard for me to, I don't know if you feel the same, but when there's players in a team that can strike a ball so well from a free kick, you wonder why they don't also take the penalties. It must be the mental thing. Because you've got Ward-Prowse, for example. You put him on the penalties and he takes the free kicks. You're more than happy with that. And you've got someone like Odegaard who can strike the ball so well, and he takes the free kicks and stuff. And Saka can as well. But I would have thought maybe in the future we could see Odegaard claim them.
And I'm not totally convinced by Saka on pens either. You talk about when Tony goes up, you were nervous. I'm always nervous when Saka goes up. So yeah, I know what you mean.
Is that because of the England thing though? Is that the thing?
No, I just think the way he strikes the ball from a penalty. I don't think he's not. He doesn't appear to be a clean striker of a ball, Saka. He obviously is, but it just the way he approaches and strikes the ball. I mean, I love him. He's straight in my team, but I would feel better Odegaard taking pens for that reason. He just appears to be a better, cleaner striker of the ball. Eddie Nketiah, I mean, that was a risk for me to go with him. I do like the idea of having the 3 attacking players for their double in 23. While I think the Arsenal defence is strong, and if we go and look at defensive data over the last 6 game weeks, if we go back, and look at that, Arsenal are, only 4th in terms of defensive data, XG non-penalty, but over the season, they're the second best defence, 0.79 XG conceded non-penalty per 90. So the Arsenal defence is strong, but it's what you said earlier. Because I want that fun and excitement, I want 3 Arsenal attackers for the double. It's Brentford at home and Man United at home, I think it is. I remind myself they're the 2 fixtures that they've got. Man City at home. But I think that I want those attackers because it's just going to be more fun to watch having Eddie, Saka and Odegaard than it is going to have Gabriel or White, certainly with City coming to town as well.
Yeah, I like Nketiah a lot. I think that was a masterstroke. I saw a lot of people saying they were put off him because they thought Martinelli might play up front and all this stuff. I never fully bought that. I thought he would play. My concern was more like if it doesn't really particularly work out, he's going to have early subs and it could go down that route. But we must remember when he actually played last season, he did a pretty damn good job then as well. Didn't he? Looked like he was a useful player.
Yeah.
That's a very good, useful player. And obviously that price for the league leaders up front, I mean, it's silly. I mean, if you could offer me the swap of Gabriel to Nketiah, I'd take it for sure. When is Jesus back? I think it's quite a while now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, all the photos I've seen where his leg's still in a brace, that makes me think that it's going to be, wow.
And I suppose in January they're probably not going to do anything because it's going so well, but I don't know.
Well, that's what shocked me, actually. When Eddie came into the team, it didn't disrupt the flow at all. If anything, they looked even more fluid after the World Cup, didn't they? I mean, that's what's been impressive in that I thought that Nketiah could replace Jesus in terms of goal threat. In fact, he probably offers a bit more. But it's just the fact that they haven't missed Jesus's work rate outside the box as well. He's seamlessly slotted in, and they've been as fluid.
Shows how well everyone's playing, right? Because they're so dominant. They've obviously got Partey and Xhaka playing so well, pushed up. It just all contributes.
Yeah,
everyone's playing so well at the same time, which is the problem for a lot of the other teams. It seems to be they might have one or two that sort of turn up every now and then, but they can't get the whole unit playing consistently well together. So yeah. Fair play to Arteta. That's one thing I wanted to point out, actually. Do you think this season, and maybe this is part of why Liverpool and Man City have had a bit of a drop-off, it just seems to me that the quality of coaching and the managers in the league is at the highest level it's ever been in the Premier League. I think if you look down the whole league, it's only probably when you start looking at the sort of the bottom 3 or 4 teams where you'd say, not quite sure about that manager. The rest of them, in all sorts of positions, I mean, even someone like Vieira at Crystal Palace, right? He's not having a terrible season, but his appreciation of modern football is clear to see. He took over from Hodgson and completely changed that team. Yes, he's having a bad time of it now, but his understanding of how to set up versus the teams, is still there, right? Even the teams that are doing bad, you've obviously got the new Wolves manager come in as well. Looks like he's pretty handy and he sorted that out. Marco Silva at Fulham. I mean, the Sam Allardyces and stuff are not part of this league.
I love where you're going with this, and we're going to be here for another 3 hours. We go with this because I totally agree with you.
Marsh,
I think that the standard of your manager or coach is now more of a factor than ever because it's marginal gains now in terms of quality. Yes, obviously we got the top 4, top 6, but I do think that a good coach can get you a long way in this league now more than ever. And I think the methods, like you said, of the kind of, if we go back 10 years to the likes of Sam Allardyce, and maybe David Moyes is being found out now, which is why he's struggling this season. The methods have moved on, and the modern coach now can have that impact, and we're seeing it more than ever. When we came up with Steve Cooper, I said the thing that's going to keep us up, it won't be the 23 signings, it'll be Steve Cooper, because he is a top coach. I know that, and I think it's widely renowned. He did what he did with England under 17s, won the World Cup. He's got a good reputation, and lo and behold, he's turned us around, he's settled us, and we're now, if you look back at the data, which I'm very proud to show this, we're over the last 6 game weeks, we're 6th for the attack and we're 5th for the defence. Now, he's done that out of a team of new players. That, again, emphasises what you just said there. In terms of managers having an impact, I think it's more palpable than ever.
It's ridiculous. There's Zerber at Brighton, Thomas Frank, Brentford. We could just go on. Villa obviously just got their new manager who's got a proven history. He's going to turn. It looks like he's going to turn them around. Vast upgrade to Gerrard, even if the results haven't necessarily gone that way. I think it does make a big difference. Eddie Howe, what he's doing with Newcastle, and I think that's part of what's contributed. When I was saying about the Man City and Liverpool, the drop off. I don't think it's necessarily. I think there is a bit of a drop off, but I think teams know how to play them a lot better now than they ever did, and it's a lot tougher as a result. Yeah.
So do you think that in seasons gone by, Klopp and Pep would have come up against some naive managers or managers who don't have the nous to work out how to approach that game, whereas now that's fewer and fewer opponents?
Yeah, I think that's bearing out. I mean, maybe that's a little bit harsh, but I think back in the day, it was essentially everyone behind the ball, pretty much. That was what looked like.
It wasn't even called a low block then, Luke, was it?
No,
Couldn't even get away with calling it that.
And yes, we all know they want to try and hammer and maybe hit the big man and drop it off and get up the pitch or whatever, kick and rush football, as they say. Maybe I'm giving them a little bit of a disservice now, but I think now the teams are able to cope with it a little bit better, it seems, and at least fashion their own chances. There's always going to be a lot of luck, right? You still have to survive the onslaught and whatever, but it just doesn't seem like we get the onslaughts as much anymore. It seems like teams are very good at stopping, these guys just absolutely dominating. And yeah, it's just nice to see. It's good to see that, the coaches can have a big impact. I suppose it's not just the coaches; it is also the players, right? I think the level of players.
Yeah.
Look at Fulham's team with Mitrovic and stuff. I mean, in the past, Mitrovic has played from other teams, but the level of player he is now, he'd be highly sought after, I think, by a lot of clubs if he was to ever go on the market. And there's players like that all across some of these lower level teams.
Yeah, I mean, Craig Boycook says, the manager has always been the most important factor in any team's performance and always will be. Yeah, I agree with that. I think our point is that across the league now, the standard has increased and you can see it. And I think perhaps that has made it harder for the likes of Pep and Klopp to have that advantage that they've had in previous seasons. They've got the better players, but now other managers that are coming up, or more of them, are more tactically astute and have a way of countering what they do.
Yeah, and there's the next bracket below. Ten Hag coming to Man United. Does anyone not see that as an upgrade on Solskjaer? It's night and day in that situation for me. I know it's early days for him, but it certainly appears on his level of knowledge of modern football. Anyway, I'm sure we banged on about that enough.
No, it's good. I mean, that's the kind of conversation I don't often have with Az. So he's going to have to up his game. If you like that, please like and subscribe.
Give the video a like. Hit subscribe.
Thanks, Andy. Let's move on to the predictions. And these are Az's predictions and my predictions for the week. You haven't given any this week, but you're wise to stay out of this, Luke. I'd recommend doing so.
Can't compete anyway. You lads hit crazy numbers, over 50%. You should be making some money.
Well, we haven't got the percentages here on show this week because Az hasn't sent them over to me. Of course, the game week's still in process as well. But we'll go through what we predict and see what the differences are. Liverpool-Chelsea, Az has gone for a classic 0-0. Brilliant. That'll be worth watching then, Saturday morning. It's not quite the Garden Centre game. I've gone 2-0 Liverpool. I think I buy into what you said. I think that Liverpool will turn it around and can turn it around. And I think, talking of clubs in turmoil at the moment, Chelsea are no great shakes, are they? What are you making of Chelsea and Potter?
It's early days, isn't it? But he's another manager. I've got faith in Potter. I think he's been unfortunate with some of the injuries and stuff. And I don't think their squad is made up. The bottom line is they need their centre midfielders, their best class midfielders, to be present, and that's part of Liverpool's problem, I guess. Their centre midfielders. It's almost like a shit off in the centre midfield at the moment for these two.
Yeah, it is a bit that way.
So we'll see. I honestly can't call this game. I just have no idea which way it goes. That's why I stayed out. I hate the predictions thing. I don't know which way it will go. If you had to push me, I'd say Liverpool, but that's probably because I've got Salah sat in my team and I'd really like him to do something.
Yeah, I'm sure that bias has played into my thinking as well because Az hasn't got Salah or Darwin now, I don't think. So he's gone 0-0, I've gone 2-0. Now, Bournemouth Forest, Az has predicted a Forest win for the second week running, which is, I'm trying to recover from that. I don't think we will. I think we'll be happy with a point, and I think the momentum is with us. There's no doubt about it. I think Bournemouth have lost their last 5, and we are in a good run of form. But I think we would take a point. I think that's the way it's going to go. Injuries biting for Forest, so I've gone 1-1. Az has gone 2-1 to Forest. What do you make of Forest? Do you think that we'll be all right there, or?
I think you'll get a result. To be honest, I think you couldn't have. Bournemouth are just they're just awful at the moment. Go back to the manager thing as well. The Slanky, I don't know if he's out. Is he out injured? He didn't play recently. He's
got a knee injury and he missed the Brentford game, I think it was, wasn't it? So I'm not sure he's back for this one.
Yeah. I mean, they basically can't fashion a chance. So it'd be a surprise if they scored, essentially. So I think you'll be all right. I think you'll win.
Kiefer Moore always troubles us, and we've got a lot of injuries. I think they'll get one at a set piece. We have got no Henderson as well. Hennessy in goal. I'll worry about it. Leicester Brighton, Az is going very buoyant on Brighton now. He's gone 3-0. I've gone 3-1. I just don't see any other result than Brighton winning. I mean, Leicester were poor at Forest. I just didn't think they had a couple of chances through Barnes. We know Barnes misses chances though. They had little else to offer, and they looked vulnerable at the back. They looked like they had that organised, but not against us, and I think Brighton will tear into them. So I've gone away win. So Az, I guess you're going with that as well?
Yeah, I'll go with an away win, yeah.
Southampton Villa probably would certainly be Garden Centre if it wasn't a 3 o'clock kickoff. I've gone 1-1. Az has gone 2-1 Southampton, back in Nathan Jones to continue the form. And there's something in that, I think. Villa are one of those teams that are beatable, but I think they're strong enough where they'll get a point and they'll take that. West Ham Everton, crucial game at the bottom, which feels weird to be saying that about two such established teams. I've gone 2-0, Az has gone 1-0. Do you think Moyes will turn it around? Former club, Everton, of course.
I don't know if I've got a bit of a soft spot for Moyes or not. I can't work it out because obviously I was originally a Man United fan before I basically gave up to FPL, and he was pretty much atrocious for us. But he did really well the last few weeks, and obviously I hate anyone getting any negative press, and he just got berated, didn't he, for ages after that. So I felt sorry for him. But they are dreadful this season. I think what will save them is Everton are just, if anything, even more dreadful. So yeah, West Ham at home, you'd expect them to get a result here, I would say, but that is a low quality game at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. And talking to coaches, Frank Lampard, where'd you stand on him? Okay, that's said enough, baby.
Yeah, I don't really think I need to say anything, bless him.
Okay.
It's not worked out, has it, for him, unfortunately?
No, it hasn't. And I think that in his career as a football manager, he's got somewhere to go. I think he will make it, but I think that at the moment he's struggling for ideas there. And Everton have obviously spent a lot of money in wrong places. But losing the home games, I didn't think that. I mean, Everton's home form is what's crucial to them, and they've lost the last 4 at home.
What's happened to Calvert-Lewin in your mind? Because at one point he was looking like he was, essentially the backup for Kane and would be the long-term successor, maybe. Yeah.
It's service, though, isn't it? We saw when Rodriguez was there, and they had that creativity, and they had the service from out wide. He could produce returns. At the moment, they had Townsend, who was kind of an average player, but he could provide width and he could provide service. Do they have that now? They've got Iwobi playing central. What have they got out wide?
He's had a good season, Iwobi, to be fair.
He has, yeah.
Yeah, probably one of the highlights, or the only highlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but it's just not working, is it? You can't see it turning around, unfortunately.
Palace Newcastle, and while I say this, can you give us a score check on Palace United? Palace Newcastle, we've both gone 2-0. I don't see another outcome there. It's very similar to the Brighton Leicester. Newcastle too good, don't concede goals, and they'll have too much for that Palace defence. And I think Palace are getting dragged into it. And how are they doing tonight, Luke?
It's 0-0, 40 minutes in, but 64% possession for Man United, 0.93 XG, and Palace have got 0.06 total. So it's not looking good for them again so far. I think Zaha. I think surely Trippier is eventually going to blank. Like, is that going to happen, right? Am I at the casino now and it's come black 58 times and I'm telling you it's going to come red on the 59th one? Because I would say Zaha, in the past, I would say a game like this is the kind of game Zaha would probably work, because Newcastle, they're confident, they'll push forward. Now they'll try to win the game. You maybe have Zaha on the counter, right? And he can turn up randomly in games like this. So, and you've got him in your team, so probably liking me saying this at some point, but no, you've both gone 2-0.
I've got to sell him though. Do you think I should hold him for the Newcastle game?
Well, I mean, on paper, he's penalties and midfielder. He could be playing up front.
I say that every week, don't I? I say that every week. I mean,
this is why you don't go there to begin with.
I know, but I
to stop this
was
issue.
Taken in by the fixtures they had when they came back, and he's done absolutely nothing. And I think when the data we showed earlier, he's regressed massively in terms of his key stats. So there's no glimmer of hope with him at the moment. I'm not seeing anything that makes me think he can turn the corner. So I can't hold him, and I don't see joy there against that Newcastle defence. So let's move on to our Garden Centre game, which is the 2 o'clock kickoff. There were 2 o'clock kickoffs, but it's Leeds-Brentford that I've gone with. So the Garden Centre game is Leeds, as I say. I've gone 1-1, pretty dull. Az has gone 3-2 to Brentford in a classic. Where do you stand on this? I think Brentford will go there, spoiling tactics, and it'll be a tight game. Az surely sees it the other way, Tony going mad. Do you have great hope there for Tony?
Well, I think both of these teams, when I was looking at this yesterday, they let up a lot of shots, don't they?
They do.
Lets up a lot of shots, and we know that Leeds are a very hard team to gauge, aren't they? Because even under Marsh, it's very similar, where you just don't know what you're going to get. They look fantastic, they run 1,000,000 miles an hour, but the end product varies wildly. So yeah, I can see where Az is going with the 2-3. I think both teams could have a wild amounts of shots, but it could equally be 1-1. There's not much inside. No. It could be a dull game. This is why I'm not doing these. I don't want to call it.
I think it'll be dull.
I think though.
Yeah. I mean, I'd rather have City Wolves on telly, I think, because I think Wolves are an interesting side at the moment. I've gone 2-0 in that to City, but I think they will, under Lopetegui, they will provide a test to City. I expect City to, like Liverpool, to start edging around that corner of convincing us again with their performances. And I think they will start with a 2-0 level Wolves. Do you see nothing but a home win for City? I'm presuming when we get to the captaincy, it's going to be on Haaland for that reason.
Oh, it'll be on Haaland, no doubt. Yeah. I'd imagine Man City are going to win, but you, like you say, at the moment, Man City has not been going well, and Wolves look like they've made some improvements. So I think they'll make it tough for them. But it's like I said, I think it can click at any moment. It could easily just end up being a 4 or 5-0. Often these things, it depends on how early the team scores, right, and how early they settle. If they manage to get 1 or 2 in the first 10 minutes, then you just never know. But yeah, I've got to back a Man City home win. Even the way they're playing, you've got to, surely.
United just gone 1 up. Bruno's just scored. So well done to anyone who went him as a differential. Luke doesn't like that. He probably already knows the EO impact of that one. Arsenal, United, we've turned against United. Az has gone 2-1, I've gone 2-0. It's tight. I think that Arsenal will edge this, though. I don't think it'll be an open affair by any means, but I think an early goal and then they'll follow that up and catch them on the break. I won't ask your opinion on that because you're a United fan, Luke. Fulham Spurs, I've gone 2-2 and Az has gone 2-1. Again, another team that I think will start hopefully recovering and finding form. I've got Doherty in that. I don't know what I'll get, but I've gone a load of goals. Hopefully he participates in those. There we go. That's the predictions. We'll move on from that to look briefly at the captaincy. Is this even a debate? I mean, we have this every week where we kind of reducing the value of this kind of look at the captaincy options. Home to Wolves, that's not a game week where you look elsewhere, is it?
I mean, where else? I mean, Kane away to Fulham. I don't think you'd want to go with Salah. Home to Chelsea, as bad as Chelsea have been, I don't think you'd want to go there. And there's pretty much nowhere else, is there? So it's Haaland, yeah.
When do we captain Trippier? It's ridiculous his consistency, though, isn't it? I mean, this is based on the Fantasy Football Scout poll, and Trippier's in the top 10 now almost every week.
Really?
Yeah, he's in the top 10 every week because people are going, well, he's always delivering. So, yeah, it's...
I think he's... when was it? Someone put it, I think it was since Gameweek 8, maybe. I saw that Trippier has doubled Haaland's score. Since Gameweek 8, he's had double the amount of points or something, which is just mental.
Wow, Haaland. I didn't know that.
It's something like that, yeah. It's like 41 to 40 or something like that. No, sorry, 81 to 41 or something around there. I'll have to find the tweet, but it, by all means, have a look. It's mental. Haaland got the majority of his points in the first 8 weeks, and then it's sort of been a more steady trickle. And Trippier just every single week, like you say, 8 or 9.
We've all got him, and it's a similar thing. It's like, he's a player that doesn't really affect our rank at all because everyone's got him in their team. So I think that's the shame with FPL this season is that the best players. There's a lot of players in the Premier League that we like watching. So many of them are so popular in FPL that they have so little impact. And so when Haaland scores or when Trippier scores a free kick, it really doesn't resonate with our game weeks at all because so many people own them. It's got to the point where if Salah got a hat-trick, it would be a huge seismic event because he's so relatively low owned now. But yeah, Trippier has just become a permanent fixture in all our teams for the rest of the season. Incredibly consistent, but we're still not going to captain him. Fair enough. Okay. Let's look at our teams. This is yours first, Luke. So for the podcast, you're going in at the moment with Ederson, Gabriel, Ake, Trippier, Saka, Rashford, Martinelli, Salah, Tony, Mitrovic, Haaland, captain. No transfer?
Hopefully, if I can get away with press conferences, injuries, etc., I'll just leave it and try and save 2 for what we've discussed about the chip strategy and possible double game weeks and blanks. That makes the most sense to me. I think even if someone got injured, I don't think Pereira home to Spurs or Dunk away to Leicester, even worst case scenario, I guess Shaw away to Arsenal, I like the worst options to come in. So I'll probably leave it. There's part of me that'll be tempted if Stones is if we get any inkling that Stones is going to play, I do just prefer him long term, and I would, I can't be 100% that Ake will play, or I suppose I can't be 100% about Stones either, but I'd certainly be more confident. So I think, if we get any murmurs around there, then maybe I'll do that. But they're not the early kickoff, are they? They're actually on they're the day after, if I remember right. I think they're Sunday, so that doesn't seem like it's a likely thing to happen. So probably just leave, yeah.
I think we said before the show, didn't we? If Ake doesn't start and Stones comes back in and maybe starts with Diaz or Laporte's in there, then we'd hope that Ake wouldn't come on. I think he'll end up playing left back and Cancelo won't be there. But if he doesn't start, then perhaps he won't come on. Then you get Dunk off the bench at Leicester, which is with the set piece threat that Leicester are terrible at corners, and Dunk obviously could be a factor. So in a way, you're probably looking at Dunk and saying, right, any other week I'd play him. So that's not too bad for you, is it?
Well, Review initially wanted me to bench Rashford for Dunk.
There you go.
But Rashford's minutes were slightly low, and I wasn't having that, so I fixed that quickly. But yeah, it does fancy him in that game. So that, like I say, that's probably what I'll do. I don't know if I'm as confident you. If Ake wasn't to start, I think the problem is he does often bring, and you've seen this with Diaz probably a lot with Pep. He will actually bring on a centre back if he feels like he needs that kind of player, like as in basically a battler, someone who can win the ball in the air, and is essentially a really good defender. And Diaz and Ake both tick those boxes. And obviously Kane, we know, is very good in that area. We also know that I think they've scored the most goals from set pieces this season as well. But that all leads to make me think, well, surely you should probably try and find a place from Ake from the start. But I'm just trying to say that I think there is probably a slim chance that you could see Ake come on in the game, unfortunately. But I'm not going to not play him off the back of that. If it happens, I just take it on the chin.
We'll see what happens tomorrow night as well. I mean, I think Ake will start left back tomorrow because of Kulusevski and the threat there. I think he'll want him against Kulusevski on that side.
Well, that's what I meant. I was talking about Spurs, right, which obviously has an impact on the Wolves game. So with the Wolves game, I think Ake. I think actually on paper, it's not really particularly a game for him necessarily. You'd expect them to have a lot more of the ball, and obviously ball progression is not his top area. So Stones and Laporte combo in centre defence probably makes more sense for that game. But like you say, if Ake's left back, then that's fine. You could use Rico Lewis as the right inverted, and you could use Ake as the left back, which then wave into the back three.
Well, you're the man to ask on this. So if you're worried about it, I'm worried about it. So it's interesting what you say about Stones. I was feeling exactly the same as you. Before the injury, I was going Stones all day. And it does feel like a wasted transfer to move to Stones now. But probably if I see a few weeks where Stones is back and he's settled again, I think he's the one.
Yeah, I think he's my preferred option. The bottom line is there's 5 of them now, isn't it? And DS is back as well. So whoever you pick, you do run the risk of them not playing. And especially as you move forward with the Champions League. What you want is like a couple of seasons ago now where they had the DS and Stones combination and they went on something like 10 clean sheets in a row and they looked impenetrable. We want something like that to come back in, but I'm not sure we're going to see it because he does like to pick depending on who the opponent is. So unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get it. And that's why we went Edison and got all these lovely points.
Yeah, well, that didn't work out. If you had Cancelo now, what would you do? Hold him?
I think you hold him at the moment because I also think there's a chance he plays Spurs simply because they play a back 5 and he offers width, which none of the other fullbacks particularly offer. Lewis was more inverted. He could. We haven't seen it necessarily, but it's nothing to say he couldn't provide it, but we haven't really seen it. So I think there's a chance he plays Spurs, and obviously he didn't play that badly against Man United. And we know that before this little period, he was like a mainstay of the team. So I don't think you can completely write him off yet. But the bottom line is if you're paying that much money and there are games that he's missing, then he's not an option, is he? So we'll have to see, I suppose. Essentially, if he misses one more game, I think that would be it for me.
I always like to talk City when you're on because you spend much of your time looking at their team sheets and coming up with it that I like to pick your brains. I'm sure the listeners want to hear it as well. What they probably don't want to hear is about Az's team, but we'll go through it quickly anyway. He's got Kepa in goal, Trippier at Palace, Botman at Palace, Shaw at Arsenal. Oh, he's got to play Shaw. That's not going to know. De Bruyne at home to Wolves, Kulusevski away at Fulham, Rashford away at Arsenal, Odegaard in his team at home to United. Mitoma's come in as his transfer for Pereira, and Haaland's his captain, and then he's got Kane up front. So Kane and Haaland, pretty impressive. He's benching Martial, he's got Bueno, and he's got Patterson. It's not bad, is it? It's pretty good, and he's got that Mitoma factor in there.
You've seen that picture of the horse, haven't you, the kids drawn, where it's like crap at the back and then it looks actually pretty good at the front. That's pretty much what this is, although Newcastle will probably just end up getting a clean sheet again and then it will be fine. So that's...
But he'll pay in game week 25, Luke. That's when we'll laugh. When he's having to play Bueno and Patterson, who's not even going to be there. But it looks good now. I mean, like Kane and Haaland, you can't really question it. And that midfield... maybe Kulusevski is a stretch too far. I'd probably think there's better options there, but the other 4 are pretty well placed, I think. Very good. I think my hopes of catching him are disappearing. This is what I'm going in with. Edison in goal, Trippier at Palace, Doherty away at Fulham, Ake at home to Wolves. Then it's Rashford, Salah, Saka and Zaha, who's probably going to be my transfer out. Mitrovic, Haaland and then Eddie Nketiah. and I've got Andreas and Stupinan and Shaw on the bench. Like you, I've got that Brighton defender there can come in if Ake doesn't play. And Zaha to Odegaard, or maybe Pereira to Mitoma is what I'm thinking. The issue with Andreas to Mitoma is obviously what I'm doing there is taking out a player who's going to play in 25 with a player who potentially blanks.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it. I don't know. Removing. So you're going to take Zaha out for Odegaard and play him against Man United?
Well, that's it. It's not attractive because of the fixture, is it? And then you know what Zaha does, doesn't he? If he can't. Yeah. But I that was always the move. I took White out to get Odegaard. Do I have to do it this week? I don't have to. I could roll the transfer, then do it next week, and then I've got the 2 transfers moving forward.
I think you roll.
Yeah.
I think the sensible players roll, but the way my luck's going at the moment.
But then I've got to watch Arsenal and Odegaard, and he could really hurt me, couldn't he?
He could. You've also got the fact that you've got Trippier in your team, and you don't want to play Zaha versus him, right? So that's always in your mind as well.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? Yeah.
If a Trippier will get points somehow, you know he will.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, he'll get bonus in a 1-1, wouldn't he? So it's fine.
Probably.
I don't know yet. I don't really want to watch that Arsenal game without Odegaard. That's the thing. But you're absolutely right.
You're that worried about him?
No, I just like watching Arsenal, and I haven't been able to own Odegaard yet. And I want to watch Arsenal with Odegaard, and it was always. But I think if
they'll
you
roll
think
out
that
Fred for that, they're going to sit Fred right on Casemiro and Fred.
They're going to Fred him, aren't they? Yeah, absolutely. They might even put the Mac Fred partnership back together again.
No, surely not.
No, you are right. It should be likely be a tight game. And would I want to go in with 3 Arsenal attackers into that? No, but would I want to go into Zaha against the best defence in the league at the moment as well? No. But equally I don't want to play. I guess I could go Zaha to Mitoma, but then I am putting in a player who is going to blank in 25. So
I think it's an easy roll for the information.
It's not an easy roll. It's a roll, but it's not an easy one. I can't.
You're
I'm
the
not
master.
buying
I'll
that.
leave you to it.
Well, look at me, 4 million. You know, I know what I'm talking about. There's been people in the chat tonight questioning my pedigree as an FPL manager. I'm too tired to argue with them, to be honest. I'm too jaded
leave
after.
It out, people. Leave it out.
This is the Black Box League. Andrew Shaw, who's often in chat, he's still top, 1307. Out ahead of Mark Bleakley. Abby Jew in third, 1297. No sign of our friends Raptor and Chris Glover at the moment, but I'm sure they are pushing to be back. Luke is happy not to see Raptor in the top 10. We don't like it when other content creators do well, but no, he's having a very good season.
I'm just playing the pantomime villain. Don't take that personally, Raptor.
No, of course he doesn't. That's great. That is the end of the show. We've done the 2 hours after all that. We kind of knew we would, but you came up with some great topics there. We had to talk Man City. And we've done that to death. I think we've looked at Arsenal, we've looked at the chips. Luke isn't playing with the chips at the moment. He wants more information. We're going to get that, so we're going to have more chip talk to come when Azzy's back. We have no show next week, of course, but we'll be back ahead of Game Week 22 with more information up our sleeve and obviously more chat about double game weeks and chips. Luke, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. You bring that level of expertise in areas which this show often lacks. I'm not saying it's me as well. You often bring a touch of class to the show, and your insight on Man City is much wanted the season we're having at the moment. I only wish the captaincy was more of a debate, and then we could have debated that as well, but there was nothing to discuss there. We'll have you back on before the end of the season, and you must do a match of the day challenge with us. Are you up for that? Have you ever done that, Luke?
I've never done that. No, I'd be more than willing to do that. That'd be decent. I imagine my face will look similar to that perfect picture you've got of Salah there with weighing heavy.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's been me in recent match of the day challenges. I'd love to get you in a week where you take a risk because so far this season, when you've rarely done that, it's really hurt you. So I'm going to watch out. Let me know when you're next doing something silly like Luca Dean, and we'll get you back on.
It won't be far. It won't be long, I'm sure, before that happens again. Yeah.
All right. It's good night for me.
Good night for me.